Hey everybody, you're listening once again to the GhiBliCast, the show where we break down every single Studio Ghibli film in order of release. I am your host, Digibro. I watched this film only yesterday. Devu, when did you watch this film?
Only half of it yesterday. Got bored and finished it today.
Hippo, when did you watch this film?
Oh, it feels like it was only yesterday, but it was in fact yesterday.
And Ben Saint, who we all know, watched the film today.
I finished this film about 5 minutes ago.
And I think you and I are the only one who had seen it before.
Yes, my friend, also named Conrad, weirdly enough. But yeah, he's a film buff that I knew, invited me to go see it a couple years ago at the Coolidge Corner movie theater in Boston, which is a hip, trendy joint for,
that was when it had just newly been brought to America for the first time.
Yes,
It's a film from 1991, as evidenced in the title. Year I was born, incidentally, and now I'm the same age as the protagonist.
Whoa.
She's
tapestry.
She's 27, right?
Yeah.
What?
Even though she looks 30,
She looks
because of the weird face
yeah,
lines.
everyone looks old.
Yeah.
Everyone looks old in this movie.
That's my biggest main point, is that the cheek lines add 30 years to the character's age.
Yeah. So she looks about 57.
What that seems to be to me is Takahata leveling a full frontal assault on anime's infantilizing cutesiness that it gives to every character. It's trying to make everyone look hot, trying to make everyone look simplistic, and he's like, I want to add some wrinkles. I want to make things feel real, and that's why you also see the characters have such diverse facial expressions. And I just always assumed that he would be bullying Miyazaki around the studio, scuffling his hair, calling him Blobby McSameface. And Miyazaki would be looking at himself in the mirror, naked, looking at his shriveling dick, thinking, I will never be enough of a man to draw my characters with a single wrinkle. I will never make a waifu who looks kind of old, except for the one from Howl's Moving Castle, kind of technically, if you count that. All my characters have to be perfect looking. I am pathetic.
This movie definitely strives for realism in almost in a way that seems a little bit like a reaction to how movies usually sound and are and act.
I find it funny that, Devu, you had an idea of Takahata and Miyazaki having differences and maybe making fun of each other, because in one of my notes I had this idea that a lot of the seriousness and the realism is poking fun at Miyazaki, and how well, there's a specific point. We'll get to it.
So I'm a little out of the loop. Who exactly is Takahata, and what is his relationship with Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli?
Takahata is basically the guy who Miyazaki trained under. So both of them come from Toei Animation Studios.
Is he still alive?
He just died this year.
Okay.
Incidentally, but rest in peace. But Isao Takahata was he directed, the first film he directed was Horus, Prince of the Sun, for which Miyazaki directed certain sequences in it.
Is that a Ghibli?
No, this is before Ghibli. Takahata and Miyazaki and another producer, I believe Toshio Suzuki is his name. They all made Ghibli together, and they were all part of. They were originally from Toei, and then they just, split off to go make their own movies, basically, like any other. That's how any anime studio comes into existence. So people from one studio go fuck off to make their own and manifest destiny or whatever. So yeah, Takahata. The only reason that he wouldn't have didn't have the first film, I think, is that him and Miyazaki would have been working sort of in tandem. But Takahata had already made 5 or 6 movies before Ghibli's existence, so he was already a big name. He was already the household name director before Miyazaki became the household name director. But whereas Takahata's films never really left Japan in a major way, because they are a lot more Japanese than Miyazaki's, which are more accessible and fun and whimsical, and a lot of them are more kid-oriented than Takahata's films.
This movie is so fucking Japanese, it hurts.
It definitely is very, very Japanese.
The realism really makes the Japanese come through a lot. The other farmer guy who you meet halfway through the movie, their interactions are so grounded that it is like you're watching actual Japanese people, not like anime characters. When you like watch, like, okay, because my only experience to real life Japanese speaking Japanesians is watching like interviews, and you see all of their tics, they're just the way that they talk, the way that they look, and that came through in this movie in certain scenes, and I don't see that normally. All animation from any culture is going to very much average out any sort of racial bias and make everyone just sort of look like spoons.
The fact that the guy like clicks his tongue half the times when he starts speaking is just one of those things that it makes it very clear they were going out of their way to be like as realism as like realistic diction, and like people should talk like there's parts where people like mess up their words and restart sentences and stuff like that.
The characters laugh a lot, and they laugh at things that aren't funny. And it's kind of weird in a movie, but like that is how conversation is in real life. Like in real life, people laugh for no good reason. And I don't know, it's weird to watch a movie where the characters will say something like completely banal, and then they'll start giggling about it, and then they'll like explain themselves. I don't know. It's weird, man. This movie's bizarre. Yeah, this movie's bizarre. I felt it just doesn't feel like a real movie.
I mean, I think this movie, the most interesting thing to me about the way it's formatted, is that it is very like circuitous in getting to what the point of it is.
Yes.
And I think that is kind of important to the message of the movie. And I'm just going to come out right at the top here and say what I think this movie's about.
Does it have anything to do with autism, possibly?
It's a movie about autism.
What the fuck? What are you
everything
talking
is
about?
autism to you now, but
It's not. No, this movie.
I don't
okay,
disagree.
this movie even says in the movie that it's about autism.
What the
There's
fuck
a
are you
scene-
talking about?
Huh?
Are you talking about when the mom says she's not normal?
Yes,
See,
I am talking about that.
she's not autistic. I'm reading
she's
your mind
artistic.
right now. What do you?
I
no.
want you to figure. I want you
Well,
to
'cause she's
find
bad-
me a way that.
If she was autistic, she'd be good at math. You dumb dumb.
Quite the opposite. She's good at art.
Yeah.
And she's only able to express math through art. And she only understands things pictorially. That's why she. So, I definitely think that this movie is the main character trait of this woman is that she is very bad at communicating with people because she tries to do it in this very roundabout way. Everything she tries to express, she has to sort of meander around the point and find her way to the center of it. Whereas the guy, what makes him the reason they fall in love in the end, and I'm getting way the fuck ahead of myself, but like, is that he is good at identifying the through line. And it's clear that this guy has experience dealing with people like her because his friend, who he basically listens to the advice of, is like her. And he admires that kind of person. Anyway, I'll get into all that later, but that's just my baseline.
I didn't get any of that from this film.
Well, and it's funny, Ben, because I was re-listening to your previous review that you did of this movie back in...
Well, not analysis or whatever it is. Yeah, my video.
Right. And there was parts where you were saying how there were certain things in the movie that you just don't get, like that you thought were weird. And it reminded me of the Mr. B-Tongue theory of, the way I understand a movie is by focusing on the parts that I don't get and trying to understand them.
Yeah.
As he said about Django Unchained. And exactly the parts that you were talking about not getting are the parts that helped me to get it. Like, for instance, the fact that you were talking about how all of her dialogue is so banal and she seems so disinterested and so, like, just full of pleasantries and, like, she doesn't really know how to engage in conversation. That's deliberate.
Yes.
It's because she's fucking autistic. She doesn't know how to talk to people. Like,
To
that's
me, that
why
just
the movie
seems-
feels that way.
To me, that just
this-
seems like a real person. Like, and it's weird in a movie, but that's just seems like how people act generally.
I know what you're getting at with the autism thing, but I don't think, especially at the time this was made, I don't think like mental illness was a factor. I think it was just like the person that animators generally, because they do this indoor hobby that is very intensive. Are usually people with like bad social
And
skills.
granted,
and
when I
have
say the word
problems like this.
autism, I'm talking about the autistic spectrum. I'm not literally talking about like brain
Right.
dead
There's an
autism.
implication. There's
kinda-
an implication of like a mental illness factor, but like it's really just
not
anyone.
even first of all, autism is not even a mental illness. It's just a different brain schematic. It's just a different way of thinking. Well, I mean, that's true. It's not even in. It is literally not considered a mental illness anymore.
And remember, just because the writers didn't think about any specific diagnosable conditions when they wrote a character, doesn't mean people
that
say
you can't diagnose.
People attribute autism to Sherlock Holmes, like his original incarnations.
Right. Here's what I think about this. I think that what the movie was shooting for was to make this woman as normal and relatable as possible, and I think. I feel the total opposite. And I think that they kind of failed and fell a little below the mark and made her come off as kind of a dummy.
Okay, Ben, here's where I disagree, because I felt that way the first time I watched the movie, that when I was watching all these backstory scenes and shit, I was just like, yeah, this is exactly what my childhood was like. And then there was a moment where the mom says, that girl's not normal, and then I thought, oh wait, that's right. My childhood wasn't normal. My childhood was exactly like this, but everyone thought I was fucking autistic. So then I thought about the movie through that lens, and the way that people treat her is no one thinks she's normal. They all think she's weird.
I don't really see this as an
about?
Autistic thing. I see this as an artistic thing, literally,
same
artistic.
Difference.
No,
I honestly don't know what you mean by that. Nobody treats her weird at all.
Because I had literally the exact same thing with math. Maths is I was difficult with numbers, but with shapes and 3D stuff. I'm great with 3D, and that helped me be good at drawing.
Your fucking math word got new worlded, motherfucker. Holy shit. I'm struggling to not say maths these days with all the goddamn European educational videos.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think the idea, I know you use words loosely, but every time I see I hear oh yeah, Sherlock Holmes is autistic, I'm like,
Well, okay. Let me just really quickly, for the sake of making this, because I'm going to be talking about this a lot in this, so I might as well just break this down. What is the autism spectrum? The way I would look at it is that everyone's brains are slightly different, right? And broadly, most humans are we're 80, 90, 99% even the same, but there's something a little different about each of us, right? Now imagine if you took everybody's brains and you lined them all up in order by the variance. So you start from the left, and then you put just to the right of the farthest to the left brain, the one that is the least different from that one. And you just keep doing that until you've got everybody. And now you've got the spectrum. That is the human spectrum. Now, what is normal? Normal is if you drew a circle around a section of that spectrum where the bell curve lies, that is normalcy. And we build our society around that bell curve because we want to service the highest number of people. Now, if you fall outside of that bell curve, that means that you have a different brain schema, and that's essentially what people mean when they talk about mental illness, because it's not so much that you have something wrong with you innately, it's that you have something wrong with you as compared to being able to function in society. So autistic people, it's not that they are defective, it's that they don't work in a world that's built around the bell curve. So that is what this character's problem
is. Which is most demonstrated in math. Do the math problem. What? You can't do the math problem.
Right.
What the fuck? But then it's
especially in Japan, where math is such a big deal in their culture because it was kind of the way forward for them for a long time. And this movie's in the 60s when we really don't have much understanding of the differences between people. Japan is still trying to find an identity for itself that it can cling to, post World War II and create this very specific things that they think are the way. So school is such a big deal, and if you can't be good at math, then it's you're not going to be able to succeed in this society.
And the most tragic thing in the whole movie, the worst thing that happens to her, worse than being beat to shit by her dad for wearing her socks outside, worse than
I cannot
period
wait to talk about that
misinformation
scene.
Is
incidentally, I think the dad is also autistic.
Yes, definitely. So is that after she has to go through this whole thing of people raking her over the coals for not being able to do a kind of equation right. She then gets picked first for theater, and she is told that she basically can't show off that fact. She can't tell her classmates that she was picked first, even though when everyone's grades come out, everyone gets to talk about who got the best grades.
Exactly.
Now, by the way, I do want to say
this is something I think all of us have probably experienced some variant of this, of like the thing that you are innately good at, you are not allowed to be that thing, even though, because something else is considered what you're supposed to be good at, you know? This girl is naturally capable of like almost any art form she can pick up kind of easily. Like when she tries to explain to her sister why she doesn't get the math, dude, I was fucking like throwing a party during that scene.
Yeah.
Because I literally do not grasp dividing fractions. Like it's the
Oh my
for
god,
the same
it's
reason
so
she
simple.
doesn't.
No, Jesus, it's fucking a dummy could do it. An idiot could do it. They say that
see,
in the
Ben,
movie.
you're saying exactly
Like
what her
the
sister
sister.
says.
Yeah,
but
Exactly.
the
the
reason,
sister's right. The sister is normal and
but
good,
the-
and everyone else is a demon.
Ben,
I will say that I couldn't follow her drawing of the apple. either.
Her explanation did not make any sense. What she was saying made no sense.
what she was trying to explain is that she can't visualize how dividing fractions applies in reality. Like she can't
It's
figure
really
out
simple.
how.
It's just how many times does a quarter go into 2/3? That's it. That's it.
Right, but like if
What
if
is
the
that,
sister had been able to
substantively?
visually explain that, like to explain it through the form of apples, then she might have got it. But because she can't understand it as a vague concept, she can only understand it as something applied to physical reality. And when she tries to ask the sister to do that for her, the sister doesn't understand it in that way. She's like,
Right.
to me, it's just a formula that I had to memorize and that I can apply things to. But to this girl, she's like, I don't get it that way, and that's how I feel.
I will
Like,
snicker at
know?
you for bringing up autism because you bring it up in everything you talk about now, but
Right.
but it's clearly explicitly in the text with that scene.
No, it is
yeah.
not.
And
Oh
again,
my god.
forget the word autism, just different learning problems, right?
It's not being
pretty,
a visual learner. Being a visual learner is not autism, and it's
Just-
not
okay.
it's not that weird.
Right.
Yeah, I think the mom and the sister are way too hard, and I think that she says she's not normal just because she's frustrated, right? But ultimately, I don't think
No,
it's
remember,
she
the mom
has a
talks
real
about how-
problem there.
Okay, one of my
Like-
favorite lines as well is when the sister says, like, you know, maybe she's retarded, like we should go test her IQ again. And the mom says, well, when we took her before, they said it was fine. And so, like, there's an understanding within the society that the girl is not dumb. She just
Yeah.
doesn't get math. And the mom, you know, gets that in the end. She's like, look, I don't know what to do about this, but, like, maybe she's just bad at math. And, like,
Yeah, later they say that.
yeah, and so like she has achieved some understanding. It's just a matter of she doesn't know what to do about it. But what I'm trying to tell you is that when I say autism, I mean autism spectrum. I'm not talking about like being specifically like so far down that spectrum that you can't even communicate with human beings at all, but like
Okay.
everyone who has difficulty fitting into society is somewhere on a spectrum outside the bell curve. They are somewhere on their problem is that they think that they can't fit in because of who they are. And the reason that she is so fixated on this grade, this moment in her life, is that this was the time when she realized she was different. This was when she realized that she didn't fit in, that she didn't understand what the people around her were doing, that everyone else seemed to be in these weird cliques where they all had hive minds, and she had nothing like that. She just felt weird and ostracized and different, and her family didn't get her, and the people around her didn't get her. And, like, so it's because that is like the inciting moment for what she's feeling now, which is she doesn't feel at home in the city. She feels like she doesn't like being in this place full of people. And when she tries to explain it to the old lady, she says like, oh, Tokyo's a bad place. It's full of cars and buildings. People shouldn't live there. But like,
Yeah.
she's trying to, her excuse is the artificiality, but she's already had it explained to her by the guy that everything out here is also man-made and artificial. So what she's really saying is, I don't like people. I don't like being in a place with lots of people. She wants to be somewhere where she can be more alone, where she can be with people who understand her and form closer relationships and are capable of grasping the things she's saying. And that's why the moment when she falls, like when she realizes she loves the guy, is when she says, how is it that he's able to take the things I say and make them make sense to me? That's what she says about like why she likes him, is that like she doesn't get her own thoughts because they're so jumbled and so cloudy, but this guy can just listen to her talk and then find the through line, you know?
Yeah.
And incidentally, that's also, it reminded me of when I used to see a therapist, how the thing that he said that stuck out to me the most out of everything was, he told me, you have this way of talking where you just constantly jump between different things. Like you have a cloud of ideas in your head and you can't find the way from point A to point B. But normal people can do that. Like normal people just find what they're trying to say and then say it. You can't. You have to explain the whole universe just to get to where you are. And it's just because that's how I think, you know? But like what I've spent the last 15 years doing is training myself to find those through lines and get, you know, and be able to put that into words.
Hey, question. What is the main character's name?
Oh God, I don't remember.
I don't know. I just watched it.
I think it's Taiko.
Is it Taiko?
Taiko.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Taiko.
With the guy's name is Toshi.
Toshio?
Yoshi.
Yeah, Toshio.
Toshio. Something
Had really struggled with the character's name in this one. I mean, okay, yeah, everyone's weird, right? Like the girl's obviously weird and doesn't fit in. But like that's most people's experience of childhood to some extent, right?
And
I guess that's
agree.
Because,
and
yeah,
I also think that that's part of the message of the movie too. Is that I think that she overestimates how different she is from everybody else, and that's part of her hang up is that she really thinks that like. And when she talks about stuff like her sisters and how they would remember, like, she says, oh, my sisters would just remember all the pop music and all the, like, the cultural stuff that was going on. Like, whereas I fixate on all these traumatic memories of, like, things going wrong. And, but when she talks to her sister on the phone towards the beginning, the sister tells her, like, hey, you need to put away all that baggage from the past.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not that her sisters don't remember these things happening. It's that they have realized that fixating on it will mean you can't move forward.
Yeah.
And so, like,
her fixation on her childhood is extremely annoying and makes her incredibly unlikable to me, like, right off the bat. I'm glad that, like, I didn't really pick up on it the first time because, like, I think the first time I watched the movie, I missed the first couple minutes. I didn't really, but like definitely the theme is like, I don't know. The movie seems to be kind of schizophrenic in this way because on the one hand, it's the theme is explicitly that you should get over your past and leave your 10-year-old self behind. But on the other hand, it's like kind of obsessed. The movie itself is obsessed with childhood memories and nostalgia and trauma.
I feel like, well, yeah, and also she would not have had like the experience that made her realize that farmer boy was right for her when if she didn't gush about that weird memory she had in front of him.
I hate that scene where she talks about Abe because, like,
really?
I don't get what the relevance there is.
That scene was when I finally got the point of the movie. I did not get the movie until that scene.
I just saw it as like a nice documentary about this person telling it to herself, to us.
What I like about that scene is that was sort of where my whole like theory kind of about her being like autistic and specifically about the way that this guy is able to pierce through that.
Well, that's the only time he does it, right?
No, he does it all throughout the movie. He's always like, yeah, he does this thing where when she starts talking, you'll see like a look of recognition on his face, and then he kind of just eases back and listens, waits for her to finish, and then says either what he thinks she means or something that he thinks will resonate with her that he's thinking about.
I don't like the guy either because he indulges this girl's boring stories too much.
Yeah, well, that's why they're perfect for each other.
Yeah, it's like she'll tell a long, boring story, and then she'll end, and then he'll be making this face. He'll just be making this kind of like interested face with his mouth slightly agape, just slightly agog, and I can just hear the "so desu ne" about to come out right out of his face, like a fucking rube.
I will say that is why I don't like this movie that much, that it's all so normal and so banal that I just like, why was this like even animated? Why wasn't this like a made-for-TV documentary thing?
That's what I was saying earlier, is that
but,
the reason it's animated rather than live action is because it's something that speaks to a lot of animators.
Actually, you know what I want from this movie? Yeah. I wish this was a mixed media movie. Like, I think it would have been best if the present scenes were just were in live action, and then the other stuff was animated, just because of the fact that the over realism of like the modern scenes, it felt like jarring to me. Like, I thought it was weird seeing. It was kind of like, why would this even be anime? Like kind of what Ben was just saying, but like the other parts, like, I agree with both stances. I agree with what Hippo's saying and with what Ben is saying. It's just that, like, the parts in the past, if those had just been anime and the other parts were live action, I mean,
like,
kids like me would have still gone to see it because I love that kind of shit. Like, I'll watch a movie just because half of it's animated.
Watching the segments, like watching the childhood segments animated is nice, and I like it. It's interesting enough. But just imagine being Toshio and standing there for 10 minutes, like listening to it described. Like, can you even imagine a worse hell? Because I can't.
I just want to say, like, the whole thing with the flowers and like her fascination with, you know, farming and old ways, and like, yes, I love all this old stuff. The way that she was like explaining it felt like a documentary in such a way that I actually got interested, and now I want to look it up.
So earlier when I said, why was this animated, I didn't mean I don't think it's the right fit. What I mean is, why even take the effort to make it a movie? Why not just like have a conversation? Just like, hey, let me sit down and talk to you about what it means to be slapped by your dad.
I'll tell you why. And this is why I called this movie the Autistic Farmer's Bible. Because I think that what Isao Takahata was trying to do with this movie was to... I think he took this as a way to say, hey, do you feel like this girl? Well, let me propose farming in a way that will make it sound cool to you, autistic person.
Yeah.
And that's why we all
did.
come away from this movie thinking that the farming scenes made it seem really cool, because they presented it in a way that well, I mean, you're more self-assured, I think, in like, because I had a long conversation with May about this movie after watching it, that like, if I was someone who didn't know what I was trying to do with my life, like if I didn't understand myself and I didn't understand like what is my purpose, and I had thought I was supposed to be an artist but then just kind of realized I didn't really want to do that, and then like farming is something that most people who are like introverted, you know, like people who are from the city would never even consider. But the way that this movie presents farming is it tries to interest you in the history, the systematic nature of it, the fact that it is all man-made, that it's not natural, that it's like, you know, hey, look, this is engineering. Like, get into this because it's engineering. It's not nature shit, you know? And so I think this movie is just an advertisement for trying to get autistic people to be farmers.
I think that her problem is broader. I wouldn't call it autism. I think that she's just, I mean, like, everybody loves like Stardew Valley, right? This movie's basically Stardew Valley the movie.
I'm laughing constantly.
You say everyone, but like, do normal people, like, do normies play video games?
Okay,
like,
well, not everyone, but lots. I think lots of people feel this way, that they don't fit into society, and they want to, and they would at least entertain the fantasy of like throwing away your dumb job and moving out to the country and being a farmer. Not me. I think it sounds worse than death, but you know, I think a lot of people would entertain that.
I've felt like more. Like, I mean, watching this movie and seeing all the nice scenery, I was like, yeah, you know what? I like that. I want to do that more. I want to do that all the time. But then, I've only ever done it for about a week at a time anyway. And, like, when she was having the reservations, like, oh, I haven't been here during the winter. I haven't been here. Like, I don't know how I can't do this. This is too much. And, like, I was like, yeah. It is kind of a silly fantasy that you wouldn't really do for real, but then she does it for real.
I'm thinking now about the different kinds of skills and different kinds of personalities that our society quickly rewards. You've attained normie value, being good at math, being good at memorization, following instructions, and or sports. And I don't necessarily think it's because, people who are good at math and sports took over the world. I mean, that's largely true, but lots of radical idealistic thinkers with different personalities are the ones who became the giants whose shoulders we stand on. I think maybe what it more is that if you're good at math, it's really easy to quantify how good you are. It's just how fast can you do equations. If you're really good at sports,
It's also a thing where I think a lot of people have a conception in their head of like the normie as like a timeless perennial idea, but it's always been different. Like every time society shifts, what is normal is different. And so like right now, like the reason that like comic book movies, for instance, are so big, it's like people always say, nerd culture is mainstream culture. And that is literally true. It is not nerd culture anymore. It is no longer outside the bell curve to be into superheroes. So like, you can't even think of it as a nerdy thing, because the definition of what a nerd is someone who is on this other spectrum. And like when I say autism, again, I'm basically just mean anyone outside the bell curve, like
and
anyone
the bell curve
not
is
a
ever
normie.
changing. The bell curve is contextual to culture. And yet, what I was
Exactly.
saying about sports,
And as the culture evolves, so too does that move.
How good you are at sports, it's just really easy to quantify, because it's just how many games do you win or how fast do you run, which can be measured, right? And I think.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just realized you're talking about that, Digi. You're saying that the whole like autism is defined by the contextualness and the bell curve and stuff. And when you say you want to build a city, you want to build a city for autism so that the people in the city make the bell curve.
Exactly. That is the idea of the autistic city that I think that a lot of what I am on, the reason I keep bringing this up, especially on GhibliCast, is that a lot of anime is about this. Like, a lot of anime it's people who are outside the bell curve trying to identify with each other and find a sense of community to build something together. To be like, hey, the society that we're surrounded with may have fucked up our lives because they didn't understand us and didn't find a place for us, but it's not that we are broken, it's just that we are different. And if we found whatever system we would function in, we would be just as functional as anybody else, you know? That's why I say it's not a mental disorder.
I'll tell you the one modification to the bell curve that I would make if I could pick one, or if I was making my own city. Definitely the first amendment to my bell curve would be social standing or social interaction is all about saying/doing something interesting. And that is the measure of a good conversation and good interaction. Because
I would like that too.
Just last night, in the bathtub with the wife, we'd be talking about Star versus the Forces of Evil and comparing it to Steven Universe. And she says that
you're such a fucking degenerate.
And she says...
In a bathtub, of all places.
And she says that she thinks she's enjoying Star more than Steven Universe now because, like, it's becoming really plot-focused, and Steven Universe still has lots of filler episodes. And I kind of get into a tizzy thinking about how I don't think Steven Universe can possibly have filler episodes when the point of the show is to be half plot, half slice of life. And so I start getting really enraptured in this idea of what filler means contextually and whether or not Steven Universe fulfills it. And she was just getting really annoyed, feeling patronized that I was explaining the concept of filler for like 30 minutes. But I wasn't trying to explain it to her. I was exploring it. And that for me is what good conversation is.
You're exploring it to her.
But it just seems like, yeah, it just, I'm nerd-splaining for her. But I think what people, like, the stereotypical normie conversation is that you're supposed to, like, touch base on a shitload of topics, and if you actually try to say anything about it, now you're going on about it too long. You're supposed to, like, say what you like, say what you've been doing, say an opinion, make a comment on the weather, make a comment on something, but don't ever let something turn into a back and forth. That's just too weird. And that's where my main disagreement with standard interaction comes from. And I feel like anyone could do it if they were told that it was normal and what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that happens is that not enough people are willing to say, I'm not interested in what you're saying, and then just walk away. Like, that should be, like, a requisite for the system you're proposing should be that everyone should also be totally comfortable, and it should be a social norm to just tell people when you think they're boring. Yeah. And that should not be seen as an insult. It should just be seen as, like, an escape, you know? Like, I don't want to do this right now. I will set time later in the future, possibly, for us to have this conversation, or find someone else who is interested in this because I'm not. Like, dude, those should be things that we just say.
I feel like people who would do that would be respected, even though people would initially think, "Oh, what a jerk, what a dick," dude, because like the people who get told that they're boring, like they might actually feel something. They might actually be like, "Oh." They might self-reflect.
Dude,
it'll be good.
I'm listening to an audiobook about Jeff Bezos and the founding of Amazon, and they're talking about how one of the hiring practices that they used from other companies that were dynamic that they came from was you ask them the typical questions about what their background is, but then you throw total curveballs their way by asking things like, how many gas stations are there in the United States? Or why are manhole covers round? And the point is not to see if they guess correctly, it's just to watch their critical thinking process unfold to judge the strength of their intellect and their creativity. And that's fucking awesome.
We got to get back to talking about Only Yesterday.
Maybe.
I was going to say, we've
Too far down
ventured
this
pretty
hole.
far afield.
Oh, I had a thing. Well, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Is that they used to do that with the RAF. I think my grandpa told me the story where like people
That's
who
the
go
Royal Air
to
Force, right?
Royal Air Force, yeah. They asked the interview and all that, and then they asked them like how many steps did you take to get up to this room? And if they like think about it and try to answer, then they're lower down on the pile. And if they say that's not relevant, that's who cares? Like if they basically just dismiss it, then they get more points
That's
because
good.
it's
That's
like
what you want.
they care about they think about the important stuff.
I'll say something that will then transition back to the movie. So the reason why I think the bell curve went in this assembly line production is that stupid people or people who don't think that much, just the standard package size fits all, anyone can conform to it, which makes it a lot easier to propagate. Something like teaching a class on how to be a good critical thinker, well, there's no real model for that, and it's really hard to reproduce that. And as a result, people just don't know how to help you if your skill is to be an independent thinker. It stands to reason that if you're independent and different, people aren't there to help you, just like Taiko Taidei's family, a tie-dyed shirt's family, none of them know how to fucking help her. They just stare at her and they are confused.
And I think that a big part of what she learns in the later part of this movie, and this is almost a movie that I would say is like too subtle for its own good about certain things.
I would
where,
agree.
Yes.
I wanted to get faster.
It'll go on and on about like, just like just showing the everyday life and like, exploring the entire occurrence to make it feel realistic. But then like the important message you're meant to get out of it is like brushed past or not really explored that much. But like one of the things is that everyone was always trying to help her. And I think that that's what is represented in the end when all the kids are following her around and like they're all excited for her, is that like all this time she seemed to have it in her head that people hated her or like that because she was different it was like wrong. But like when you really look at what her sisters and her mom and are trying to do for her, it's like they wanted the best. Like when she has the opportunity to become an actor, all of them are so excited for her because they're like, oh my god, maybe she's not retarded. Like her sister literally says that, wow, something you're actually not bad at. Like they're so excited for her to have this opportunity, and when it gets fucked up, she gets mad at the older sister and is like, why'd you say that to dad? You messed up my chances. And the sister just kind of like huffs off to her room and closes the door because what she doesn't want to have to say to her is like, I'm also mad at dad. Like, I was trying to help you. I was trying to convince him, because I knew he would be hard to convince. So I tried to frame it that you could have a career in it because I thought maybe that would work. And it didn't because he just doesn't like showbiz people. But because the dad is also utterly bereft of communication skills, all he does is just say his words and be done. Like, if he could have explained...
I can't...
That dad is bad. That dad is a bad dad.
That dad put more
dad.
fingers to cheek than syllables to voice.
He had a bad dad.
You got to remember that he only hit her once and he regretted it forever.
I'm not even just talking about the hitting, although
Still makes you a bad dad.
I totally don't get what was going on there. I mean, I sort of get it. It sort of felt right, but like when I try to explain why did he hit her, I'm like, I can't quite put my finger on what it was.
There was one just little movement in his face that showed everything. It was basically he reacted without thinking, slapped his daughter because of a thing in his childhood, probably because of the same thing where he went outside and he got beat the shit because he didn't wear his shoes.
I mean, it wasn't just that; it was that
and
they were
like,
all super pissed off and stressed out leading up to that.
There's no like proof of that, but like the small look in his face and the fact that he was like instantly regrets it.
That whole scene is a giant a giant secret tension build, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
I could feel the tension building.
The way it orchestrates is that the problem is that what the scene is basically meant to communicate, I thought, is that the dad has spoiled this girl and he doesn't know how to unspoil her because he doesn't know how to talk to her. And so like the way it all begins is that her sisters are trying to tell her like, hey, you always get all this small shit and we just get big stuff every once in a while. So equivalently, they spend the same amount of the dad's money, right? But the girl wants the big stuff as well because she's jealous that they have it, even though, like, to demand that is literally to ask for twice as much as what she's already getting. But she can't wrap her head around that, and they're trying to explain it to her, and she's just being a spoiled brat. Now, the dad, the only way he's ever learned how to deal with his daughters is just to buy them things, because he doesn't know how to talk to them. So all he does is just, when they want something, he buys it for them, and it worked for the first two, but it's not really working on this younger one. And, like, when she asks, she wants the bag, the sister doesn't want to give it to her because she likes it, and as soon as she finds it, like, you know, they're kind of having this push and pull between them where, like, they're both being kind of arrogant. Like, she doesn't want to admit that she just wants it because that would seem childish. But when the girl says, like, you can keep your bag, she's like, fine, I like it. I don't want to give it to you, you know? So, like, at that point, it should be resolved. It should be like, hey, we've made our stances clear. I want the bag, you claim you don't. But the girl's being dishonest. She does want the bag. And the sister is really annoyed that she won't just come out and admit to being a spoiled brat and just take the bag, because she... So when the dad gets wrapped up in all this, there's the moment where he comes back inside and he looks at her and he says, "You're not coming?" And she says, "No." And she's just sitting there, and he just kind of stares at her for a while, like, trying to think of what to say. And then he's just like, well, I don't know how, like, what am I going to do? Tell her you can have the bag? Because then I'm just spoiling you further.
When he's
you know?
when he's looking at Taiko, because, like, earlier in that sequence, she says, "I don't want the bag," and the other sister's like, "Well, good, I like it, I don't want to give it to you." And then she's asking the dad for a bag, and he says, "You said it, you have to do it. It's like, you said you didn't want the bag, so you don't get a bag." And then, when he's looking at her, it's like she said she doesn't want to go, and he, like, gives her a second, but then she doesn't change her mind. He's like, well, she's said it. She said she's not coming, so she's not coming.
But that's the thing, like,
even though he knows that she wants to come, just like he knows that she wants the bag.
Right, and he's looking at her, and he's just like, I don't know how to resolve this without just spoiling her. Like, his only idea is just give her what she wants, because he doesn't know how to communicate. So eventually he just says, well, fuck it, just stay home and think about it yourself then. And then when she runs outside, it's just like, it's reached a point where unless someone does something, this is not going anywhere. Like, she's hung up, she's being unreasonable, and, like, if there was a way to have a conversation and make her understand that, then it should be had here. But he is incompetent at this, and we can see this all throughout the movie, that he's super curt. He never, like, has conversations. He just gives demands. He just reads the newspaper and tells people what he's thinking or feeling or doing. He says things at one point he tells the wife, like, I'm ready for dinner, take this away. Just like, that's the way he is. So he doesn't know how to be emotionally open or to communicate that way. So he just ends up hitting her because he's just so frustrated. And, like, when he sees this thing, like Hippo said, I definitely think it was, like, a trigger for him. That, like, this is something he cares a lot about because he would have got hit for it.
Right.
Like, if he had run outside that way, he probably would have gotten hit. So for him, it's, like, totally unacceptable to, like, damage these clothes. Like, I mean, it shows a lack of gratitude for the things he spoiled her with. He buys her these nice clothes, and she runs out and fucking gets them dirty, and he's just like, you know what? Fuck you, bitch. Here, this will make you think about it, But
right.
And
obviously
he's not
easy to
thinking.
say.
And then after the scene, when she's talking to the other girl, and she's like, yeah, he only ever hit me that one time, and the other's like, oh, my dad hits me all the time. It's like, oh, well, that's probably better in the long run.
So it's easy, I said in the beginning, oh yeah, she had a bad dad, but it's more accurate to say she had a bad Japan, or a bad human genome. So our society does not promote this. It promotes this idea of parental entitlement. I do the work, I clean the shit, I made you come to life, so your emotional health is secondary to, like, me.
My comfort.
Yeah, not just comfort, but, like, to all the adult responsibilities. Well, we're going to ignore the fact that you're going to spend your entire 20s, 30s, and 40s dealing with all the bad memories I'm going to give you. You just need to be pushed into line, right? And we don't, like, okay, for example, we teach the idea that kids shouldn't be, like, rocking around in a grocery store, but we don't teach the idea that you should tell your kids to be mentally prepared to stay calm and be bored for an hour. Maybe give them a book or a game or something, right? Like, adults aren't forced to be put into a situation where they have absolutely nothing to do for an hour unless there's like immense social pressure, right? Like we confuse children by putting them into situations where they feel shitty and feel like failures, and instead of educating them on how to be responsible or be thrifty or be conservative with the family's spending, we don't teach them these things. We just get frustrated and go, ugh, why are you like this? You should feel bad about yourself. Feel like you're a terrible person.
And as a result, when we grow up, we don't have the tools to explain that stuff either and repeat the same mistakes. And yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting. I've never really thought about that, but yeah, like as an adult, when you go to the grocery store, you're not sitting around waiting for an hour. You actually have to go and do all the actions of picking stuff off the shelves and putting it in and then buying it and bringing it back and thinking about what you're gonna cook and how you're gonna cook it. And like at no point in your adult life are you supposed to be satisfied with sitting and staring at a wall.
Right, it's a huge lack of empathy with the fact that kids don't yet have a grip on why they're alive. And you take for granted the idea that you will grow up and be able to have some semblance of purpose. You may not be happy about it, but you'll at least have a structure in your mind, a framework that'll get you out of bed in the morning and get you to work every day. But the thing is, that is not a guarantee. And this ties into a frustration I have every time people propagate this notion of, oh, teenager problems aren't real problems because the second you graduate from high school, none of these problems are real anymore. Well, a lot of fucking kids kill themselves in high school. They lost the challenge of high school. And you can't say that all of your teenager problems will go away and resolve on their own when you see homeless people lining the streets, many of whom failed high school. And by high school, I don't just mean the grades, I mean psychologically. You see everyone knows adults that never grew up. That we see people fail to develop. And you as an adult, now that you're past all that struggling, you're being really unempathetic, like someone who got rich and no longer empathizes with people who are poor. Like you don't understand. It is a real struggle.
Definitely a huge part of the message of this movie is, I'm sure you guys may be familiar with a common Japanese phrase, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down.
Yeah.
That's a big part of their society, is this idea that if you cannot conform, you will be beaten into conforming.
Or kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's why so many people end up killing themselves there, is that they can't conform enough, or they're trying but they can't figure it out,
That'll be like a nail that's sticking too far up and then it gets bent when it gets hit with a hammer. That's like the suicide.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great metaphor.
The most
But yeah, that's why Bart Simpson famously said "get bent" because the nail was sticking up too high in Japan. And there was a Japanese hammer or something.
The most obnoxious ass entitled.
The metaphor is stretched too far. I can't hold on to it.
The most obnoxious old fuck turn of phrase is suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Putting the tail right on the donkey that
suicide is painless.
People
it
who
brings on many changes, and I can take or leave
Ben,
it.
you can't even hear the word suicide without singing this song, can you?
Nope.
I know that wasn't supposed to be the dominant theme of the movie about bad parenting, but it's the thing that I've been thinking about the most lately that the movie happens to include, so it's what I got stuck on the most. It's the nail I'm pounding in the most.
Well, it's not just the parenting, but, all of society is like that. And there's the part where, the mom tells her things like, oh, I would rather that you be a good eater than that you write good essays. That's pretty early into the movie. Just hey, the thing that you care, you're good at is not something that I care about. I care about you being a normal member of society, a functional member. But there's a great line where she goes off script during the play, the rehearsals, and the teacher tells her, "Let's stick to the script, okay?" And it's like she was so proud of herself for having like enriched the art form, at least in her own eyes. And then when she does it, like when she goes on stage, she does a more subtle version of doing that, and the theater people recognize her talent. Like the guys who are like, you know, out there talent scouting are like, oh yeah, she's clearly a genius at this because she cares so much
like she's
about
really
this
seeing those seagulls or whatever the fuck bird
Right.
it was flying away,
And
which is why 20 years later she still gave a shit when she finally saw some birds. She's like, oh fuck, I can finally do it for real now. Holy shit! When no one else would like care about that.
And it's so funny that she has that endless single-minded devotion that you can pour into something you actually care about. Like she can't even begin to fathom math to such an extent that like even when she tries, she fails so badly that the mom's like, if she had gotten at least half of them right, it would be worth scolding her. But at this rate, it's just like, she's
What's the
obviously
point?
just,
Yeah.
why even bother? But like, nonetheless, she can like obsess over doing one line in a play so much that she practices it ad nauseum and like character method acts it, you know?
I don't know if I'm just an idiot or if maybe the dub and the sub express it differently. By the way, the first time I watched the movie, I watched it dubbed. This time I watched it subbed. So we can talk about the differences there in a minute. But the first time I watched it, I thought that there was like there really was like an opportunity for her to become a star. And this time I realized, it's just some... Okay, well, maybe the dub implies that. But this time it's like, no, it's just some guys at college. Some college kids are making a production and they need a little girl
Dude
and they want her to be a little girl.
House. I don't know, man. I think...
What?
I mean, I think there was an implication that she could be good at acting, but not that like she literally was going to be a star.
Like the montage of like showing her on magazine covers is there, but it's humorous. It's like, come on, that's not really what we're talking about.
Right.
Here. But the first time I watched the movie, I thought that like, oh shit, like that really was on the table for a hot second.
Well,
But it wasn't.
I felt like it was because like what she does is in the future time, the present or whatever. She says, yeah, but I tried drama again, and it didn't really work out, tee-hee. I would have never been a star. But, like, I felt like that was just her speaking from, like, a place of being defeated, because her father was the one, like, who said, you can't be a star.
Yeah.
And then she didn't get the part, and she was told not to tell anyone. Like, that was probably what led her to be bad in the future, and then...
If she tried Drama Club,
I feel like if she was nurtured from that point, she would have become
made the
what
difference.
she wanted.
Okay, that's
There's
true.
a chance,
It
sure.
might have set her life on a different course, but like this thing in and of itself was not like a shot at stardom.
I think what it was,
Which is what I thought.
I think
but, like,
that whole sequence
it was
is
the
less
first
about
step towards it.
her actual
Yeah, it might
acting
have been,
prospects. It was less about like the actual logical, like how likely she was to succeed. More that the movie is just trying to show you this possible opportunity and how it was hammered down so quickly.
Honestly, I think that part of the point of why they showed it that way was to make you realize that her reasoning for like what she thought was going to happen was unrealistic. Like that even if she is potentially talented, like she's not thinking about actually acting. She's thinking about being a star. She's thinking about having her face on the covers of magazines, and like she's thinking about the end result and not the way to get there. And so when she talks about how acting turned out to not be for her, because like it's clear that she defied her father's wishes and went and did it because she couldn't let go of that having happened as a kid. And then when she actually tried it, she realized it was bullshit and she didn't want to do it. Because like I think that part of this movie, and this is more of a subtle point, and this could even be me reading into it a little bit, and I mean, obviously everything I'm saying could be, but like, this, I think that part of the message of this movie is that no matter what you choose, it's mostly boring shit. Like, any job, any profession, it's not about, like, finding something that you are just good at, and, like, you just can do well
Just
and
bringing
instantly
yourself
becoming
to
a star.
care about something.
Right, it's just doing something that you care about enough that you will do it every day, even though it is a boring, repetitive task. You know, like for me, I write YouTube videos. It's the same fucking thing every day. Like I just go and I just write endless amounts of scripts about basically the same few topics about like, you know, just exploring this. But it's because it's a medium that I could do this every day and it doesn't bother me. It's not boring. Whereas, like, if I went to work and was a pencil pusher every day, I would be bored and I would feel like it was draining the life from me. So, like, if she actually had loved acting, she probably wouldn't have given up on it. She probably would still be acting, you know?
I guess.
Yeah.
But like But based on that, who's to say like the ending is a happy one? Like the only reason she goes back to do the farming, despite her reservations about like not having been there for a very long time, is that there's a guy there.
But I do think that if we are meant to trust that she was being honest with herself when she talks to the old woman, that she explains like, yeah, I love everything about being out here. She's like, I love doing this work. I love like the environment. I love the people. I love everything about this. And it's when the old lady says like, well, then why don't you come out here? That she's like, oh, fuck. I hadn't actually thought about it. But then she does think about it and she goes, well, actually, yeah. I mean, if I like everything about it, then I should stay here and do it. And like whether or not she's going to, ultimately regret this decision is up for us to decide, like to, have in our own heads. But like
that's the reservation. It's the fear of getting committed,
She says to Toshio in the car, she's telling the story about Abe, and it's like, why do I remember Abe's name so much more clearly than any other character?
Because that character is really well, like his fucking kayfabe is really well orchestrated in those last couple scenes.
Well, she says to Toshio that like she pretends to be nice, and looking back over most of the movie, she's always very polite, and everyone's very smiley and laughing.
She's really
at each
mad
other.
at everybody. The most obvious.
When I think about it, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, you know what? I can kind of see her whole thing being like this fake nice show.
I mean, the most obvious one is when she's talking with her mom in the mall, and she's like, yeah, so my
when she was talking, God damn it, let me fucking finish. And then when she's talking to the old lady, she might have just been doing that again. She might be saying, "Oh yeah, I love it out here," because she might be overstating how much. But she does clearly like it genuinely because not normal people don't choose to spend their vacations coming out and doing farm work. So like she clearly
she's
does
not
feel
normal.
some
she's
kind
on
of
the spectrum.
She clearly does feel some kind of connection to this lifestyle. But then afterwards, when she's like berating herself, she's like, "Oh, I come out here for a vacation," and I'm like, "Ooh, I love the farm life." And like, "Oh, I'm such a phony."
Well, let me get into that because I think that another thing about this character is that she is very hard on herself because of the fact that she thinks that these attitudes she has are different or abnormal. And the reality is everyone who's nice is just being nice. Like, no one just is nice. It's a performance. It's something you do to express to other people that you don't want to offend them or that you enjoy, like, that you are showing them respect as a person. Like, she seems to have it in her head that everyone else is just naturally nice, but it's not like that. Nice is a performance. It is not just a state of mind that people are in. And, like, you can see that break down when other characters subtly show the other face they have, where like when the old lady like confronts her about moving out there, the younger, well, not young, but like the middle-aged couple who are there are like, it's clear that they have all been trying to orchestrate getting to this message. Like, they all want her out here. They all want this to happen. And the dad, or the guy, has been saying, like, hey, let's not try to pressure her too much. Like, we don't want to scare her away.
Yeah, he says you can't rush these things.
Right. But, like, this is something they're all trying to do. They're all trying to get her to move out here. It's just that they're trying to do it subtly. But then the old lady, I think the reason the old lady said that is that she recognizes this, like, hard-headed, like, this autistic, like, lack of being able to understand what the people around her are thinking. And she's just like, we have to be direct with this girl or she's never going to get it. You know?
Yeah.
That's why she says, I don't think I was wrong
Are those Toshio's parents or what? Like,
I don't know. I was kind of confused.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. But like that whole scene, it's pretty
and is
obvious.
She like related? Is she like a distant relative to Toshio?
It's her sister's husband. This is her. Those two are her sister's husband's parents. So, like, because her family doesn't have anybody who's involved in farming. However, her sister married a guy whose parents owned a farm, so she went out to their farm for the summer. So they kind of know her, and that's why Toshio's only ever met her at the wedding.
And I think Toshio is I'm pretty sure Toshio is their son. So this is her. So these are her parents. Are they her parents?
No, I don't think he's the son because he explains his relationship to the guy at some point. Oh no, he's second cousins to the husband. So that would mean that he is their one of them's siblings' kid, and I think he said he's from Tokyo. Like he's not originally, or he lived in Tokyo for a while or something.
Right.
Like that.
I think he is from around there, but
There's a lot of
Japan.
complex like relationships in this movie that
Based
are
on
like
a
just
book,
kind of
so.
you got to really pay. Well,
Wait,
okay,
is it based on a book?
No,
I thought it was based on a manga.
this is a very important point to what is my biggest problem with this movie. So this is based on a manga. The manga is exclusively the
About the
60s
little girl.
scenes, the little
Yeah.
girl.
Really?
It's an
Yeah, yeah.
autobiographical manga. It's just the manga author retelling stories of her childhood in the 60s about like different times that she was, socially awkward
That
and
would
like her
explain
memories of growing
why
up back
the
then.
whole framework seems so awkward for the first
Right.
full half of the
The,
movie.
the framework is so disconnected from the childhood scenes. Like, sometimes it really feels like they're spending way over backwards to try and connect the two.
And it wouldn't even bother me so much because like the movie tries to justify itself, and she at one point asks like, why am I so fixated on this year? And then she says,
Yeah.
I guess because that's when I was in my caterpillar stage. And like I said, I think she's fixated on this because this was the moment she realized that she was different. But no one that I've ever met would reminisce so specifically about one fucking year of their life. Like, I can't
Yeah.
believe it. I
It's
literally can't.
I knew that. I knew that this was based on a manga about the childhood bits. So like at the beginning when she's like, "Why am I so fixated on this one year?" and I'm like, I know
Yeah.
why. Like I know that there's a meta reason why. Like
Exactly.
There's one time, the narration for the first half's really weird. There's one time where she goes, for some reason I'm remembering this, and this, and I'm like, well, no shit. You're remembering scenes. We know how movies work. We know this is why we're watching the movie. You don't need to explain it. It's really weird when it's a movie that like speaks the language of subtlety and showing rather than telling, to have a character then go, geez, golly, why am I remembering this year? I don't care. It would have been better if you hadn't drawn attention to it. I actually wouldn't have thought about it otherwise.
All right. Here's a funny analysis point. What if that all is to do with her and her like lack of like understanding how to socialize? Like she's telling a story to us, the viewer,
like
but she's
even her
bad at it.
narration is autistic.
Oh,
Yeah, even her narration is
that.
like meandering, and she just says all these things, and is like, "Shut up, shut up."
I think you're right, but I also just think that no matter how much they could justify it with that logic, the fact that it's 1 year is what gets to me. That like it's so clear that this is just because the manga was about this 1 year, it was about this one era, and if I was reminiscing about the past, there's no way I would limit it to 1 year for like an extended period of time.
Okay, I think that it's kind of a neat idea to like take this childhood like slice of life thing and then make basically a new story of like, okay, well, what if this character grew up? And then we'll frame this device as her adult self, who we're writing for the first time, reminiscing about the source material. I think that's neat. And it's weird how, like, in the scene where she's talking about Abe, like, I'm assuming that the Abe thing was from the manga, but they don't show it. It's just her relating. It's her relating the story verbally within like the older framing device. I don't know. I don't like that scene, but I think that idea is.
What was cool about it is it felt to me like watching a trigger happen, as overexposed as the word is. What it refers to is that we have neural pathways in which literally a neuron triggers another, and there can be all sorts of complicated things that can just bring a memory out into the CPU that like in a way that simulates it actually happening. Hence why she has a weird composite memory of Abe on the bridge, on the rainy bridge, as if it's happening right then and there. And you only see it for a flash, and then it's just a 20-minute conversation of her talking about it with almost no visual aid. And that made that memory come to life more so than all the fully animated memories, which I thought was a really cool way to cap off the formula.
Remember when... This is right after the girl tells her that her dad hits her all the time, and that's laughed off as a funny anecdote. And
the
then
E.T. point, right? Is that what you're about to say?
Yeah. Suddenly it goes all E.T. and their hands touch, and they like there's this sparkle, and it like holds on that frame for like several seconds, like it's really important or means something.
For that, like, I know this is obviously not in any way what it's supposed to be. But I felt like that was like, oh, the YouTube thumbnail. They were trying to go for a YouTube thumbnail for that moment. Yeah, they hold on that point for just long enough, and there it is. But like, what the fuck is the point of it?
Oh, I
That
do know the
image
point.
is super weird, but the only way I interpreted it was that it was meant to show you that these characters have a connection. That like this is someone
Sure.
who she can
Yeah.
communicate with.
That's what it looks
well,
like.
okay.
But in the movie, that doesn't mean anything. Like,
No,
this
it's very
character is
weird.
not
To
important.
me, I think it's more about it's to show the connection, but also to sort of ground the movie in like real pop culture. Remember how they reference the Beatles, right? They don't change anything about it, right? I think the movie is, the movie is trying to be grounded in real brands and franchises just a little bit, so that it feels all the realer. I'm assuming the shows that she was watching may have been based on real shows that they make reference to. I don't know, but it makes things feel like it takes place in the real world more so than most things, and I think that's what the ET reference was for.
I don't know if it was actually an ET
I don't
reference,
think
though.
it's. I don't think it's a deliberate ET reference. I think
Of
that
course
what
it
that is that
it
this
definitely is.
I think that this movie is a mess, and that someone on the production team just made.
I don't
that
think it's a
image,
mess at all.
And
I
they
really-
liked it, and they
okay.
were like, "Let's just put it in there,
Ben,
even though it doesn't make any sense."
I
being
cannot agree
there.
with the idea that this movie is a mess because, for one thing, I can find justifications for everything, and for another thing,
I can find no justification for that ET image.
but I just gave you it. It said she formed a connection with this girl, and it's trying to show
That's-
you that they
but
have
that's
this
awful.
connection.
That's an awful explanation.
It doesn't mean that whether it's a good reason to put the scene in the movie or not. It doesn't. I think the movie, everything in there is there with a purpose, whether you think that purpose was worthwhile or not. But like the way that Isao Takahata
fine,
makes
sure.
movies, they are all like unbelievably laden with symbolism, and all of them have like shitloads to say about their central point. And the reason I think that character exists, I honestly do think that, like, whether you call it autism or not, and I mean, this movie came out in 1991, so you gotta remember that the movie at least would have been aware of autism. It kind of reads like going down a list of all the things that are considered symptoms of, like, Asperger's and autism. Like, because I've taken those quizzes, they're like the Asperger's quiz, where it asks, like, 120 questions, and, like, if you were to apply those questions to this character, one of the symbols of autism is you have an easier time connecting with people who are either much older or much younger than you.
Yeah,
And it's because
yeah.
people with this condition tend not to connect with their peers as easily because they either like older people who are able to understand them better because they're more experienced, or they like younger people who they can project advice onto and sort of like have power over. And the way she talks to this girl, the things she says to her is like, first of all, she's kind of like giving her like sisterly advice, and then like offers to give her money. Like, she clearly is like taking a lot of pleasure in the fact that she can like do something for this younger person, you know, and that's very much, it's just like another symptom. I really think a lot of the things in this movie are just there to like to beat the point in, to be like, hey, here's another autistic thing she does, you know, like that's kind of how it came off to me.
The most esoteric thing about this character that I most esoterically relate with is the whole sequence about the periods. And that might seem a little bit difficult to believe because I'm not female, but let me explain. So it's a couple of scenes of all the 5th graders learning what periods are, and then the boys start making fun about it. And Tie-Dyed Shirt literally, like, she basically says, oh, you know, they're gonna be assholes about it, and it's just a fact of life, so whatever. But the moment that the threat of period misunderstanding enters her mind, the possibility that the boys might misconstrue every girl who skips PE class as being on their period, she now realizes, oh shit, that means every girl who skips PE class will be wrongly assumed, or at least they'll be joked, to have a period. And that is exactly what happens to her in this composite memory, just a scene later. And this deeply upsets her. And I totally get it. And I'm sure that for a lot of... And like, anytime something like this happens to me, I really felt like I was the only one who felt that way. So I wouldn't be surprised if the average viewer didn't get what that scene was about. But for me, I've always had an easy time accepting anything that I consider to be real about me or about anything. If I think that, well, these people are making...
I started an entire show about clearing up those kinds of misunderstandings, so
Right.
I think I know exactly what you're feeling.
Like, I always felt like...
I don't think anybody likes misunderstanding or like can Like,
But
I
that's
don't
the
think
thing, though. The
anybody
fat
really
girl doesn't mind, though, because like
Right.
she sees it as like, oh well, I know I'm right. Like I know the boys are wrong about this, so why does it matter? Like she's comfortable in just knowing that she knows herself, whereas this girl is like, no, if other people think a wrong thing about me, that is a fate worse
It's
than
not
death,
even
you know?
yeah, it's not even that having your period is bad. It's them thinking that you do when you don't. It's like ugh, and that's something I've never really understood about myself. And yeah,
Incidentally,
pretty good.
there's some this movie again. This is like where I go into where it's almost overly like. I'm trying to think of the right words to use. Like if you were to go around interviewing people about their lives, or like if you read a book about how things work, this movie tries to reproduce reality that way. Insofar as the fat girl gets her period first. This is a real thing that happens. Fat girls get their periods earlier. So like there's a reason they chose her. There's a reason they chose like this age, and it on the one hand it makes things more realistic, but on the other hand it's like so on the nose that it's like it's almost like he like did research on periods and then like put all his period knowledge into the movie, you know.
Wait, wasn't the manga by a woman?
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's true in the manga too, then it could be just as well. And maybe she's just writing from her experiences, and the fat girls she knew got periods.
I mean,
first,
it's an autobiographical manga,
True.
right? So I imagine this is just stuff. The reason why it's realistic is because it really happened.
Maybe that's fair. Maybe it's just that like that much of a thing that like it's always the fat girls who get their periods first. I don't know if it's that like on the nose in real life.
Talking about the on the nosiness. The structure of the first half of the movie, which is predominantly flashbacks, I guess this is kind of weird, but I guess pretty obvious. I was comparing it to A Christmas Story a lot, another flashback movie, but that one didn't have a present time framework. It just has a narrator, and it's trying to present itself as being in chronological order, is A Christmas Story, right? It's trying to like show you exactly one Christmas, even though the memories are obviously a composite of an entire childhood. And in order to give things some chronological sensibility, things are set up and then pay off several scenes later, which is what gives it that sort of engaging pacing that makes people watch it every goddamn year. This movie has a very different approach because it's way more explicit that this is a composite memory. You can just cut back to present time and grounds things a little bit more. So they can do what would otherwise be really weird shit, like say, hey, we have a pineapple, oh man, I can't wait to check it out. Cuts immediately to the next week, and now we're starting to eat the pineapple. So the benefit of this is that you can sort of organize things by subject matter. You don't have to keep the audience waiting. But the downside is that it did make the whole framework feel kind of superfluous until halfway through when it became more about the present story.
She chews on that pineapple for so long.
Oh, I love
we just
that.
watch her chew. I don't know. It rode the line of being a little like superfluous.
I thought that scene was
unnecessary.
Yeah. That one of my main points about like the Takahata as a director guy is that he likes things to be like realistic and grounded, and so stuff like this, where like it's such a real feeling where everybody was so excited and then everybody was like and then And,
they must have got a bad
Taiko,
pineapple,
like,
because fresh pineapple is really.
Well,
I think they must
that's
have
the thing.
eaten it
The
underripe.
pineapple
or something.
was green, and the idea of the scene is that pineapples had just come to Japan in the '60s. Like it was literally the first time they'd ever seen one. So none of them realized that it is underripe. But like the pineapple is visibly very green. So like they should not have eaten it yet.
Okay. Yeah.
But like the whole like excitement and then letdown and then the extremely long pause of like awkward silence. Just the realness made it so funny. It was like the perfect like dry humor long joke. Like I was chuckling. Like this has happened to me before. This is the sort of thing. This is relatable humor.
It was pretty funny how they all kind of cocked their eyebrow in the same way. It was amusing.
I found it hilarious. I don't know why.
Well,
it was
what
just
made
sort
it
of
funny, according to this one video I watched in 2015 by DigiBro, was that everyone kind of has the same opinion of the pineapple, but all of them express their opinions differently, which is why the long dragged out scene isn't that tedious, because it's like one character just like whips out the cigarette, the other character tries to justify it, the other characters are like, it sucks.
And the scene is a metaphor for the entire movie, because like this is the problem with this girl, is that she can't just put things away and move on. She has to keep like, because she fucked up, that's all she dwells on, is like, no, I have to keep eating it to prove, like, she can't just admit that like this was a bad thing that happened and just go forward, you know? Everyone else takes a bite and they go, well, it's bad, guess I'm gonna move on with my life, you know? And like, because disappointment is just a part of life, but like this girl has such a difficulty getting past getting past disappointment.
Right, and I
like
think,
understanding that everyone else is feeling the same thing she is, that she doesn't have to pretend, you know?
And I do agree with you saying that like her dad, she probably got genetically all of her problems from her dad, and that her dad represents a version of her that she could become if she allows herself to be punched in by society. And I'm assuming her dad just had no choice. He was from an even more restrictive generation, right?
Yeah.
And you can see...
And not just that, but also that he... Like, I mean, as a man, it's very different. Because, like, as a man in Japan, you would just be expected to kind of just be yourself as long as you work, you know? Like, as a woman, it's more of, like, fulfill these certain roles that all women do. Like, because, I mean, the mom and dad are much more traditional than their kids. They've obviously let their kids... experiment a lot more. Like, she talks about how the older sister is a super modern girl, that like, you know, she covers up the back of her skirt when she goes upstairs, that she listens to foreign music. Like, in spite of the dad seemingly being a little bit conservative, he's really not. He's kind of liberal leaning and lets his girls get away with doing a lot of non-traditionally feminine things. It's just, it seems like he's more traditional when he refuses acting, but his reason is that he doesn't like showbiz people. So I think that really he just thinks that showbiz is a bad place, and that's not even bad advice. Like, I don't think showbiz people are trustworthy or good. I think that's a terrible world to like for your kid to walk into without having a better guide or a better understanding. So like,
that was basically the opposite impression I got. Like the way I saw it was he was growing up with the same problems, but he wasn't allowed to like think about going to the country, or like he just had to work, had to be a certain way, was punched way the fuck more often, and he lost his individuality, and now he just has to shut down and be bitter and cynical about everything.
I really don't think he's like that, though. I think that that's how he knows how to express himself, but the fact that he spoils his daughter so hard is like totally not that type of person. Like, he's somebody who wants them to not live the life that he led. In my opinion,
when I heard him say show business people are no good, my takeaway was he doesn't actually like believe that. It's just him reinforcing the nail pounding framework that he was pushed into himself.
I felt the opposite, honestly. Like, I really felt like he just like I felt like his failure to communicate in that scene was that he legitimately just doesn't like showbiz, but he can't explain why, you know? And if he had explained to her why he felt that way about that specific career, then maybe it would lighten things up. But like, again, just the fact that he does let the other daughters like basically do all kinds of like really progressive things. It's kind of implied that like the older sister would have been like a first wave feminist almost, you know, or second wave. I don't know the fucking decades that those would have been in, but like,
I think Japan is still in like 0.25th wave.
Like, the fact that the girls are walking around in, like, mini skirts and stuff, like, in the 60s, this would have been extremely progressive in Japan. You know, like, the attitudes of these sisters. And that's why the girl is, like, the oldest sister's, like, on the phone, as a high schooler, on the phone, talking about the Beatles, like, Western culture, you know? And, like, analyzing the lyrics of it, meaning she knows some English. So, like, this dad has let them kind of stray pretty far from God's light, you know what I'm saying? Like, but
yeah.
But he's, you know, but there's just certain places he draws lines, and you know, maybe he was just uncomfortable with the fact that these college students are trying to drag his fucking 11-year-old daughter off to go do plays or something. Like, there could be more to it, any number of reasons that, you know, that are agreeable, but he doesn't say those reasons, you know. Anyway, I just feel some sympathy towards the dad, because I feel like he can't be that bad when he's like given his daughter so much and they seem so happy, you know? Like the youngest one, even the reason she's so hard on herself is that she thinks of herself as just a spoiled brat. Like she thinks that's what her big problem is. And it's like, it's not that you were spoiled. It's just that no one knew how to give you what you really needed. So they just gave you everything you asked for. And that's how I grew up.
And that's how the whole millennial fallacy works. The stereotypical millennial is on their phone all the time and doesn't want to get a job and doesn't want to be responsible.
Not that she's a millennial, considering that she grew up in the 60s.
I'm aware, but well, it's the same condition that everyone is put into in every generation. It's just exacerbated the more technology and luxury you have. But like,
oh my god, is she a boomer?
She is. She's like older than my parents.
Boomers would be born in like the 30s or 40s.
No, Digi, that is actually extremely wrong. The boomers start in 1946.
That's too old.
Digi, you're very, very wrong. Boomers are specifically named after the World War II ending. So it's 1946.
Yeah, so, the 40s and 50s then. But
40s,
that would mean
50s,
she was
and 60s. It ends around the 60s.
That's a long generation.
Yeah.
If you were born in the 60s, then you were Gen X, right?
Hold on. I know
if the baby boomers came about in the wake of World War II, the wake of World War II does not last 30 years.
Okay, let me put it this way. My parents are 1960, and they're definitely boomers, but they are the tail end of the boom. So, like, 1963 is where it transitions. If you are 10 years old in 1966, then you were born in 1956,
yeah,
you
I
are
guess
a boomer.
she is a boomer. I mean, not that
like,
the concept of boomers
Kiki,
even necessarily exists in Japan. Like,
just like Kiki.
Oh, that's a good point. They're the ones who lost that war. It might be a different situation for them. They were the ones who were evaporated, not procreated. Shit.
Evaporated. Obliterated.
So
I don't know.
Anyway, when I look at
her generation raped Nanking.
Anyway, so with all of the
wait, no,
with all of the millennial
her dad
stereotypes
raped
in place.
Her dad raped Nanking. He came home from a hard day of raping Nanking, and he was just hated and then said, "No, daughter, you can't be a fucking showgirl."
Anyway, when I look at all the fucking
then
millennials
smacked
I know, and I put myself into the same framework, how much they fulfill the stereotype of eternal phone flipping and job not having is pretty well correlated with how much they were either beaten to shit by their parents, tormented by their parents, or psychologically pressured into madness by the world around them. And the less, the less. That is pretty strong correlator that I see. Like, the more problems with discipline and focus and purpose a peer of mine has, the more traumatic their upbringing was. And yeah, there you go. She wasn't given, no one knew what to fucking do with her, no one knew how to help her, and the system in place did not make you go, let's kneel down and talk to her. The system in place, the status quo, the bell curve, is to just beat the shit out of her, physically but mostly emotionally, until you just wait for her to just suddenly be exactly what you want her to be.
And it's never going to happen. And you see this desperation on the part of her mom, who just like wants so badly to find a way to make this girl fit in, but she just has no idea what to do. And like when she looks at the bad grades, she's just like, go get your sisters to help tutor you. You know, like that's something that I've seen a whole lot of like, your parents like see you're doing bad, so they try to pass the buck onto someone else, just hoping that like someone's going to be able to communicate with you. But it's like, why would the sister know any more? She's even more of a normie. She's even more closed-minded than the mom. Like, she's has no idea what to do about this, you know? But it's just like the mom's just so desperate for someone to be able to help her, and she doesn't know what to do, you know?
God, all they had to do, just tell her, it's how many times does a quarter go into 2/3? That's it. It's not hard. You just flip the fucking denominator.
Ben,
you just
you're
turn it
literally
upside down,
teacher.
you dumb idiot.
Of course you know how to explain it to people. You've done this.
This is why I'm not a
professionally.
teacher anymore, because I hate people that don't know things.
I wanted real quick just go into like a deep dive of the Toshio character, because he fascinates me, because he is what I call an autism whisperer. Where this is a man who is basically like mentally normal, but because of whatever set of circumstances he grew up with, his own dissatisfactions with society or the people around him and the people who he looked up to and grew up with, caused him to be someone who like admires people who are different and people who have like a weird way of thinking. And he reminds me a lot of my dad and all of my dad's brothers. Because all of them, he really reminds me of my Uncle Johnny, who is a guy who's like just as like spazzy and like, you know, runs around like high energy. And the fact that he listens to Hungarian farming music in his car. My Uncle Johnny one time was driving us around town in a Jeep with the top off, blasting Irish slave music. like, oh, Lordy, pick a bit of cotton. Oh, Lordy, pick a bit of day. Like, max volume while he's, like, driving with his feet and, like, trying to show off and shit.
Oh,
like,
God.
Total spaz. And my dad's kind of like that, too. Like, he can be...
Picking cotton in Ireland?
Yeah, well, you know, old times, I guess. But, yeah, it is an Irish slave song. I looked it up. But, So my dad is kind of similar, that he always encourages and admires like the weirdness in people. That's why he encouraged me so much, even though he himself like has no artistic proclivities, is totally satisfied being like a total normie, like lives by doing the exact same thing every single day, like that kind of attitude. And this character reminded me of that, especially because like all he cares about is just being a farmer. That is so satisfying to him. Like, he has this guiding principle of, like, I'm doing this thing, and I have reasons for why I'm doing it, but, like, as long as I am locked in to this is who I am, I can comfortably just do the same thing forever, you know?
So the thing about Toshio, and I didn't get this on my first watch, but on my rewatch, I thought more about this and was like, interesting. So, at the end of the movie, she feels bad and feels like a phony. Oh, she's just pretending to love this country life. She's not really in it for real. She's just faking it. Toshio, she looks at Toshio like he's the real deal. But Toshio says, I kind of just started farming, and that's why I'm so enthusiastic about it. So I wonder if Toshio is really the real deal either, or if he's just kind of got this... Maybe he's been doing it for like 6 months or a year, and he's still kind of riding this initial wave. Like, oh, this is so cool. I'm sticking to the man.
Very
I quit
possible.
my job, and now I'm a farmer. And I'm listening to this Hungarian farm music, and I'm all about this farm life. But how legit is he about it even?
Probably the line that stuck out to me.
Time will tell.
Like the line that gave me the most insight into his character is when so she's like she's trying to explain something to him, and she does one of her kind of like weird circuitous like autistic rambles where she doesn't really get to the point. And his response to this, because what she's saying is like kind of something really broad, like she's talking about like the broad like concept of like some social idea, and he seems a little bit like he's trying to find out how to respond, and then he responds by like hitting her with this really like heavy-handed explanation of like why organic farming is important. He's like, oh, the people in the cities just fucking like they because farming has had to kowtow to them, like nobody understands anything, and like it's all bad, right? And it's like this really opinionated thing, and she's like kind of impressed. She's like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And he says, that's what my friend said.
I'm just quoting my friend.
Right, and I agree with him. And that to me was like, that was when it blew open his character for me. It's like, oh, I see. This guy doesn't really think that much about this shit. It's just that when other people tell him stuff, like when people who do think about these big social ideas explain the stuff to him, he like is capable of, he's open-minded enough to get it. And like he can rephrase it in a way that explains it even better than they can, kind of, you know? Like he listens to her talk, and then he tries to find... He just listens to her go on, and he's like, like, the core of what you're trying to communicate to me is interesting. The way you've communicated it is a boring pain in the ass. Let me put it into one sentence for you, you know? And that scene where she's talking about Abe, he is visually frustrated because he gets in the car and he says to her, what happened at the house? And then she just starts telling a story totally unrelated. And then he takes a deep breath and he slinks his shoulders back and he listens. He gets out a cigarette from the tray. He gets out a bent up old cigarette. So clearly he's trying to quit smoking, but he's like, I need a cigarette because this is frustrating and I need to concentrate on what she's saying. She tells the entire story, and then he says, so what happened at the house? And then she launches into another story. She still doesn't explain what happened at the house because he still doesn't get what she's trying to get at. But once she finishes that story, he's like, okay, I think I have enough. Like, I think I get what's bothering you. So then he he just answers her story. Like, rather than continuing to press on about the house, he's like, clearly this must be related somehow. So if I can resolve this, then I'm resolving that, you know? So he resolves her conflict with this kid who she's been hung up on by telling her like, look, this is always the problem with you girls, is that you don't understand how guys think. That, like, if someone's a bully, it means that they have been bullied. And, like, this is always how it works, which is true in real life. Like, anyone who is an abuser is someone who has been abused. And the power structures of how people do abuse, like, you can only abuse people who are lower than you. And so this kid who was at the bottom of the social totem pole, like, saw her as someone who, because she paid any attention to him, he could abuse her. You know, even though he liked her for paying attention to him, he could still abuse her because of the fact that she gave him that opportunity. And it's kind of a confusing thing where, like, both of them kind of really are the only one that the other person has, but because of the system that they're in, they both have to project hatred towards each other. And, like, she says, I hated him the most. And that resonated with me super hard because, I don't know about you guys, and Davu, I know you were homeschooled, so you didn't have this experience, but did you guys have, like, every autistic kid at your school wanted to be your friend? Because I did.
Actually, it's interesting. I always found myself wanting to try to be friends with everyone else who was ostracized.
Yeah.
They didn't come to me, but I went to them.
I kind of did the same thing, but the thing is that all the kids who were, like, kind of cool nerds, they were the ones who made fun of me the most. Like, the people who I was the most bullied by in school, in high school specifically, was other nerds, because they saw me as, like, even worse, like, even lower. Like, I was this...
Like, you were making them all look bad?
Exactly. No, literally. Like, literally, there were kids who did not want me at their table because they were trying to flirt with girls, and, like, I made them look bad, so they would pick on me to look cool in front of these girls. And,
well,
like,
you can't blame them, really.
Yeah, and this happened to me a lot because, like, I was especially weird looking. I was, like, super perverse and, like, into weird shit, and I was totally unapologetic about all of it. So, like, these kids would, like, really rag on me hard. However, there's a certain kids at this school who were, like, so obnoxiously autistic that people didn't even bully them, they just ignored them. That no one would talk to them at all. And I thought of this kid in my art class who, if you talk to him at all, he would not shut up. He would just ramble on and on about shit that nobody cares about. And anytime he tried to talk to anybody else, they just full stop would ignore him so that he wouldn't continue the conversation. I, foolishly, because I can't, like, just look down on people because I'm someone who's been looked down on, would respond. And because I'd give him an inch, he would take 10 miles, and I hated him more than anyone else could possibly hate him. Like, because of the fact that I was being nice to him, I got to see just the full brunt of how obnoxious he actually was. And that's how this girl feels about this kid, that, like, because she's trying to be nice, she's not just dismissing him out of hand, she's trying to, like, give him a chance, but as a result, she has to deal with his horrible smell, with his bad attitude. Like, he's even worse to her than he would be to other people. So yeah, she does hate him the most by showing him any care at all, you know? But, like, it's that hate and love are two sides of the same coin kind of deal. It's like, caring about him in any way is more than he's getting from the rest of the world, you know. And his dad just, like, is someone who just punches him in the fucking head for just existing, you know. Like, this kid is really beaten down. So, like, obviously, even though he's using her that way, he also is completely in love with her. And, like, I see this in people who are obsessed with me online all the time. Like, all the people who shit on me the most on the internet are the people who can't stop following me and have been, like, reading my shit for 6 to 8 years or whatever. Like, it's that kind of, that weird push and pull of, like, I hate you, but I need you, you know? But it's like, the second that I recognized this, I just stopped giving those people the time of day unless I felt like they were gonna not be a dick, you know? And, yeah, so I just thought it was really interesting. I connected with that whole thing a whole lot, and, like, I thought it was cool that the guy, like, that resolving that is what made her understand that, like, oh, I see. If everyone is only doing this because they have also been a victim, if the only reason people look down on me is because they're afraid of themselves, then that means that we're all just the same. Like, it's the same problem we're all having. It's just that everyone else has had an easier time figuring out how to get past this problem. My sisters have figured out that, like, because they don't have that much difficulty fitting in, it's easy for them to just put aside their traumas and not think about them. But everyone has trauma. It's just a matter of, are you hung up on your trauma, or are you satisfied with your life and willing to move past it, you know?
And yeah, the movie, I don't think the movie really communicates. I don't know. The childhood parts are the most interesting part of the movie. So, in the context of the movie, I don't want to move past my childhood trauma and focus on the present. I want to forget about what's going on in the present most of the time, and, like, let's get back to the kids. One time, I got a comment on my other video that was like, this movie should have been 2 movies. The first one should have been about the kids, and the second one should also have been about the kids.
Nice.
Yeah, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that, like, what this movie, like, the reason the framing device existed was to not only, like, say, hey, if you had this past, like, here's what you need to do to move past it, here's, like, the kind of people you need to find, whatever, but more than anything, it is an ad for convincing people that organic farming is cool. Like, I really think that, because I get it, I get why he would want to make this movie for that reason. To be like, hey, this is a great exploration of what it's like to have grown up in these circumstances and to be this kind of person. Let me give you a potential job opportunity idea. Have you considered organic farming? And, like, he doesn't sugarcoat it. There's no, like, he doesn't try to make it look, like, better than it is necessarily. I mean, the artwork is beautiful, but, like, you know, it looks like a huge pain in the ass. Like, the movie makes it look like you constantly have to fucking drag shit in when it rains and bring it back out, and, like, you do the same thing every day. And
something about that was, like, cool though. Like, right. I like physical labor sometimes when it's like, because the thing when she was like, she took off her glove to see what it was like if she didn't have gloves, and she tried to do it.
The most honest
like that,
scene
I know that feeling
of the most honest, open thing about the farming is the scene when the grandma drops the marriage bomb on her, and then everyone starts talking about her when she's right there in the room, as if she doesn't have the agency to make her own decision.
Yeah,
even the guy,
like
even the
fucking
mom
no,
Ben,
dad.
no, let me talk. You're the one who always says, "Let me talk." So now is your
right.
fucking turn. All right. So even the guy who's
I
saying,
will kill you later, but all right.
even the guy who's saying, "Let tie-dyed shirt make her own decision and let her speak for herself," is not letting her talk. The granny, she frames it like a question. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And before she has a chance to answer and engage in the conversation that the granny wanted, the rest of the family swoops in to have a debate about it around her, to show her, like, to show the audience that as strangled and held back as you can be by this normie American life, you can still be just as pigeonholed by any culture, by any world. You're going to be forced into some sort of bullshit system like arranged marriages.
I don't see it that way. I thought it was, okay, I thought it was just super, like, autistic of her to just sit there and keep trying to beat the egg and not address the conversation happening around her.
I felt her feel pretty hard right there.
I mean,
like,
I felt it too.
What do
like,
you say?
That is
what do you say?
That's probably what I would have done, is just do that until I couldn't take it anymore and run away. Like, I would have reacted the same way. But I think that is... It tells you something about her, that she didn't have the self-confidence to just have an answer, or to say, like, let me think about it and I'll come back later. Like, she doesn't say, like, the obvious thing to respond with is, oh, well, maybe I'll get back to you, you know? But, like, because she legitimately has had this, like, she hadn't thought about it at all, and now that she is thinking about it, she's like, actually, what if I did try to do that? And it's like, she doesn't know how to answer that. And, like, the old lady, I think, completely was just trying to do what she knew was right for this girl. Like, I think she had her completely pegged. I think she knew exactly what kind of person she was, and was like, hey, I really think you would be happy if you moved out here and married this guy. And, like, but the thing is, when she runs away, what she says is, they all saw right through me. And it's like, she takes that as a negative because she almost seems to think that they're like making fun of her, that they're like calling her bluff, and that's not the intention. The old lady legitimately just wants her to come out here and marry them, you know, like.
Maybe it's more like she seems to, when she's upset and she's running away, she thinks she's upset because like they have seen through her, but really like it's that she has like seen herself in a new way,
right?
In like a different and unflattering way. It's been brought to the surface by this choice she's been presented with. Also, am I crazy, or is it sort of weird? Is it sort of weird for her to go on a vacation for 10 days, a single woman, and spend 10 days in the company of this man who like, she likes and who is, you know, more or less her age and all that shit, and to have never ever considered like, what if we fucked? Yeah, that's you know that's the one thing that one detail makes me think that maybe there's something to this whole autism.
I think
theory.
It's pretty clear that he like, okay, when they go up in the sky thing and they eat at that restaurant, he's like dressed like he's on a date. Like he thinks it's a date, but she is just like dense as shit. Thing? When they go up in they go up into the mountains and they ride like these sky rails up to that like restaurant or whatever. Like,
yeah.
Like the ski lift.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
the word I'm looking for. They like ride a ski lift up to a restaurant.
Somehow I didn't put it together that the ski lift and the restaurant were connected.
Yeah, it took me a second.
I didn't realize those were like happening one after the other. I thought they were just scenes. But at times.
It's probably something that we'd know if we lived in Japan. It's probably like a popular tourist destination because she did say it had gotten really touristy at that point. But like, it seems like he thought of this as like a date because he's all dressed up and shit, and she does not perceive that element of it at all. And like. Another thing that struck me as like as her autism thing is her like she tries to life hack a lot. Like when she shows up at the place, like she shows up in work pants and she's like,
and she only brought work pants.
Yeah, she brought work pants, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna get a start like right away because I'm trying to become an early riser, like right off the bat. And like it sounded like something Devu would say, like just like I'm gonna I showed up with only work pants because I'm here to work because I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. every day, like and like immediate attempt to like change everything about her life in this like short span. And then like, and I mean also something I would do, not to say that not to just call Devu, just he's even more of a life hacker than I am. But like, and then there's more evidence of that, like that weird extremeness that she goes to, like when she's explaining math and she says to the guy like, anyone who could solve this equation has an easy life. Like, it's such a huge statement to make that you're just like, what the fuck do you mean by that? You know?
And like the old lady in the field, the old lady in the field says like they don't even wear those work pants anymore.
Right,
but
exactly.
Here she is. Yeah, she's only brought work pants.
She's only brought work pants, and she's like so excited to just get right into it. She's just like, yeah, I'm gonna just be this person. And like there's just a lot of things she says about like her view of the world is like so skewed and bizarre in ways that I think other people like give pause for a second. But like, I mean, for me as someone who's experienced this in real life, I say shit that like goes a little far all the time, and like I don't always get called out on it by like relatively normal people. They're just like, huh, that's weird, I'll let that slide. Like, you know, and like there's times where she says things and you can kind of see on Toshio's face that he's like, what? You know, like especially with that math equation thing. And then there's a line, this line really stuck with me because it reminded me of something that May said to me, which is that the experience of having to learn everything backwards. And I think that this is something that people who have that different brain structure experience, that if you're trying to fit into society and you don't naturally understand things, or like they don't naturally work for you, then you have to learn it all backwards. Other people start from getting it and then they can be explained why they get it. You don't get it, so you have to learn everything in order to get it. And so what she says to him is, I bet you don't remember the formula because it was easy for you. Like, he says, I had an easy time in math, but I already forgot because I don't use it in my everyday life. And she's like, I can't forget it because I had to struggle so hard to learn it, you know? And, like, that is it's like a metaphor for autism, basically. So you have to learn things backwards, and therefore you're, like, I had this theory that I presented in a vlog recently about how, like, in many ways, autistic people are even better at communication once they learn it because they have to struggle so hard to learn it. I consider my own power to be that I am great with words, that I'm great at explaining things, and the only reason is because I was so bad at it for so long that I just obsessed over getting good at it, you know? So, like...
I believe I've said this in some other recent podcast, but Roger Vanderweed, guy who does analysis videos, you know, he says he's been diagnosed with autism at an early age. But if you
I diagnosed him with autism the first time I watched 1 minute of one of his videos. But
if you need any like proof, he has been consistently making Sonic the Hedgehog fan animations for about 20 years, so that's about conclusive. So he says that he was asked at the Q&A, why do you make analysis videos so much? Why do you explain everything like an analysis? And he said it's straight up because he can't understand anything in life without a scientific procedure. So in elementary school, he started to catch on to the idea that different teachers are going to react to things differently. They'll punish kids or reward kids by different metrics based on their personality. Most kids just sort of intuitively pick up what the teachers are going to be like, and they may or may not be correct. He went out of his way to conduct an experiment to figure out the personality of each teacher by putting jokes in his on his test pages. Like, he would add in bullshit that shouldn't be there, right?
And see, this is fucking genius, right? Like, this might be autism, but this is fucking genius.
Yeah, so he puts in like a joke or something unrelated, and then when he gets the test back, he sees how the teacher reacted. So if the teacher marked it out, if they just like got their marker and then like wrote over the joke with some scribbles, he's like, okay, this teacher is no nonsense. Don't joke around with this teacher. They hate it. If the teacher doesn't react at all, he may need to conduct further experiments. But if the teacher responds with their own follow-up to the joke, or an acknowledgement, like a pleasant acknowledgement of the punchline, then he knows, oh, I can be a little bit loopy in class, or I can say something, or I can be a little bit informal, and they'll actually admire that. And he actually said that he had a little bit of an edge at knowing how to act in each class because of this experiment.
Yeah, I mean, my friend Brandon Tolentino based all of his college classes on doing research on the professors beforehand and then just only picking professors who were easy. And so he literally got like straight A's doing almost nothing through all of college just because he only had easy professors.
He just found the easy mode. He cheated his way through. That's fucking madness.
How can that work? I thought like I mean, I remember in school, the teacher marked it, and then like a person from outside the school has to come and like make sure it's all correct. Like, you can't flub it like that. No,
I'm saying in college, like there's a website called like Rate My Professor or something like that, and basically people go on there and write reviews of their experience with the professors. And if someone said like, "Oh, this professor never gives homework," he would take that class, so that he'd never have homework. And then he'd just line up 6 professors who don't give homework. And like, even though he told me he did this and I could have done it myself, just like actually doing that, just see, like, it's so mind breaking to think that the world actually works that way, that it's like, you can't, you know, I was like stuck on it. It's like, I can't actually believe it's that easy, but it totally was for him.
I want a Gurren Lagann story, but the main character, instead of being someone with the greatest will, the strongest determination, is someone who's the most lazy. And they figure out how to break entropy by like, well, I don't want things to decay over time. Fuck. Hold on.
I feel like there is a show about this.
I mean, I guess Rick Sanchez kind of fits into that idea.
No, he's not lazy enough. There's a show. Well, there is Tanaka-kun is always listless.
Garfield,
the show about the guy who will go to any lengths to not move, and
it's Garfield,
like manipulates everybody around. Yeah, Garfield's also kind of like that.
I will say the most innovative I have ever been was in cleaning gutters. I feel like I just talked about this in a recent podcast, or I talked about it in real life. But basically, it was a job that I didn't think was fun at all. It was super boring, and I just wanted to get it done as soon as possible with a quality that was adequate enough to never be a problem. And as such, I figured out how to speed up the process 800%, and my whole family's business still does it that way now, and thanks entirely to me, basically. And they're able to like way undercut everyone else's prices as a result, because I didn't want to do it.
I would like to just back to the autism thing. I think I have a problem. I think this is kind of where the movie fails for me, because looking at the things that she says and does, I think that there's basically no doubt that Taiko is a big weirdo.
Yeah.
But nobody treats her like that. I feel like everyone treats her very nice and politely and genuinely likes her and wants her to marry their grandson or whatever.
It's different when you're a cute girl. People don't treat you the same way they treat. This is also a conversation.
Yeah, but she's a Christmas cake.
This was also a conversation that May and I had after the movie, where she was talking about how even though both of us grew up with these same kinds of social awkwardness, for her, it wasn't until high school that anyone like started to like address her at all. She was like, yeah, everyone just thought of me as a quiet girl. Because when you're a girl and you're cute and you're fine and you look normal and you're just not talking, no one has a reason to think that you are weird. They just think you're quiet. They just don't get it. Like for me growing up, because I looked fucking weird, like people immediately had a problem with me. It didn't matter that I was quiet. Like they had because I was saying something with my appearance, you know? So like, I think that because like she is a big weirdo, but she mostly just kind of doesn't say much and just kind of goes along with the conversation and just smiles like everyone else is and just like says the things she's expected to say. And that's why her conversation seems so dull and lifeless unless she starts really going on. And then she seems like she's just out of control spewing nonsense that like has nothing to do with the point, you know? So like, I think that's kind of the point, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, it does make for a kind of confusing and not the most interesting movie, but like, the one more thing I had written down, or no, I have two more points on my autism thing before I can finally move past that into talking about anything else, which is not that much.
This is the most theme-centric GhiBliCast so far.
Not true. The last Takahata movie was also extremely theme-centric.
But this one is 2 hours.
Grave
so
of the
far.
Fireflies.
We haven't even inched towards anything else yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of my notes about the themes.
Yeah, well, I mean, what else is there to really talk about?
There's two more notes I have about the autism. One is, so when they're picking the flowers, it's clear that one of the ways that Taiko relates to this farming hobby is that she's researched the history of like farming saffron, and like she feels this
safflower,
whatever.
But, yeah.
She feels this strange connection to like the slave girls who used to do this, and at one point she says like their hands would get like the blood from their hands from grabbing these thorns would like dye the things, and then she says they must have felt so much resentment towards those city girls for whom life was so much easier. And so it's like, that to me was like projecting. I was like, well, you don't know that, but that's clearly how you feel. Like, you clearly resent the city girls for seeming to have an easy life. And then she keeps talking about...
But she is one.
But her life's not easy. Because she sees herself as someone who should be living an easy life because she's spoiled, she has money, she lives in Tokyo, but she's not happy. And so she keeps talking about how much easier it was for her sisters, how easy it was for people who were good at math, how easy it was for everybody else. But then when she says, oh, but I'm just unhappy because I'm a spoiled brat, you know? And it's because, again, that's the mindset of the spoiled kid. And I get that because when I was depressed all growing up, my dad would always say, like, I don't understand how you can be depressed when you have everything you want. And I was like, because the things that I tell you I want are just what I think you can give me, but they're not what I want. What I want is human connection. What I want is a girlfriend, you know? I never had a girlfriend, so I was never happy. So, like, didn't matter if I had the coolest, the best internet, the best computer, that I had a house over my head, that I had, you know, good food. It didn't matter because none of that is what I actually would make me feel fulfilled as a person, which is purpose. All anybody wants is a sense of purpose. If you give someone purpose, they can live with nothing. If you give someone purpose in farming, they can do the incredibly boring, repetitive bullshit task of farming endlessly because they understand why they're doing it. And that's what gives that Toshio power, is that this guy explained to him why he thinks organic farming is important. And I agree with his friend on why it's important, because the problem with modern farming is that basically what the friend is saying is that farming has gone into decline because city people don't understand it. city people just think it's a bunch of people fucking off doing all natural shit or whatever, but it's not. It's engineering. All of this was man-made. All of this is calculated and planned, and because the people in the city don't farm, because there's not enough people farming, it means that we have to use techniques to mass produce our food. The fewer people are doing it, the more we have to, the more that each of those people has to service a larger number of people. And that's why we end up having to make, use more pesticides, use more of all these things that lower the quality of the product and its ability to give nutrients to human beings, meaning that everyone in society is weaker because we're eating worse food, and it's giving us less nutrients and less capability to do our job well. And the solution that we tried in the Industrial Revolution is to throw more people at the problem, make more and more people to do more and more jobs, and feed them less and less, feed them worse and worse food, mass produce everything, but that workforce is now weak and worse. And so what we need is fewer people who are better off. And that's kind of what this movie, I think, is trying to suggest, is that, hey, if you want to do something for the world, if you want to do something important that could help people, go be a farmer because there's not enough of them. And if we had more of them, you would see the benefits of this. And it's like, hey, I know you think you can't do farming because you grew up in the city and you're a spoiled autistic kid, but hey, this girl feels that way too, and look how much better things are for her after she goes out into the farm. She finds the love of her life and she's happy. So, I really think that's what this movie's trying to say, is that, making things easier, making them more efficient is besides the point, because every job is a boring, repetitive slog. It's just about, doing things right. And this is coming from Studio Ghibli, by the way, whose entire thing is that they don't mass produce their content, that Takahata spent probably 6 years on this fucking movie and did it right,
Well, he did all right.
Yeah, he did
a
okay.
decent job.
Yeah.
This is fine.
He does better in the next one, on Pompoko. It's a better movie.
Fuck, I was gonna say something else about... Oh, yeah, okay, so in the dub... In the dub, he came off as way more obnoxious in his devotion to organic farming. Only, once or twice did he talk about it when I watched it this time. I don't know. It didn't seem as bad in the sub version. Also, I want to bring up the fact that I just cannot get over, which is the utterly baffling decision in the English dub to give Toshio and no one else an Australian accent.
That's fucking weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
it was sort of like an English-ish accent. I think it was English. I watched the dub this time, so yeah, it was an English accent, and everyone else was an American.
It was some kind of accent, and he's the first person she meets when she gets off the train, and so I thought everyone, maybe they're gonna give the farmers all this regional accent, and but she's gonna talk different because she's a city boy, but no, it's just him, and why? Why he's not foreign? He hasn't traveled abroad or spent time. He's I don't know. It was really weird. And there's nothing like it in the sub.
In some way foreign, because he hasn't been he didn't grow up as a farmer, but she doesn't have an English accent either. It's stupid.
It's really there's no logical explanation.
He was the worst part about the dub. I liked most everything else.
How so?
Because it was good. His voice was just the way they dubbed over all the the realistic Japanese conversations and with the chuckles and everything. It didn't really work.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was what they were going for, but by that point it was half the movie gone, and I was like, I don't want to rewatch everything in subs.
The dialogue comes off as even more stilted and awkward in the dub.
When we started, we were trying to watch. I was looking for the sub, and I accidentally ended up watching the dub at first. And we were going to be like, oh, whatever, it's a Ghibli movie. But then when I heard the kids' voices, I was like, they're not child actors, and that's kind of weird, because I would prefer if it was because I know they want the realism. It's a Ghibli movie. I know they would use child actors. So I switched to the sub, and one of the first lines in the movie, she says to the guy, in the dub, she says, I'm going out to the countryside. And he's like, oh, how come, why spend this whole vacation in the countryside? She says, I just really like the countryside. In the Japanese version, she says, I'm going out to Yamagata. And then he says, why are you going on such a long trip there? And she says, I really love the countryside. And so I thought,
Yeah.
okay, why couldn't they have just said Yamagata if the next line is her saying the countryside, which means that we can now, as even if we're Americans who don't know what Yamagata is, we know it's the countryside because she says it.
We know enough. We know enough from that exchange.
I was just very annoyed that they would change that, and like the lack of faith in our intelligence to figure out that Yamagata is the countryside when she says it a sentence later, you know. Yeah, that bothered me. I love the scene where the older sisters are proposing to her that this place with all these cool baths would totally be sick.
Oh,
and then the
yeah.
mom just super calls their bluff and is like, "Oh yeah, why don't you go with her?" And they're both like,
What? Wait, what was the deal with that? Like,
They would just be
why
being
did that
mean
happen?
older sisters.
But what was the joke there? What was the
She was
idea?
begging her mom to go out to the countryside, and she was saying, like, do we have any family out in the countryside that we can, because you know, her friends at school had said they were going to the countryside, so she was like, I want to do that too. And so the older sisters proposed to her a way that they could, because the grandma says, like, oh, we're like regulars at this bathhouse out in the country, so let's go there. And the sisters are like, oh yeah, you'll love it out there. Like, they're trying to help their mom sort of like get this kid off her hands and like go do this thing. But then the mom's like, oh yeah, well, why don't you go with them? And she's like, oh, well, we actually think it's totally fucking lame and have no desire to do that, but like we were just kind of trying to egg the kid on so that she would accept it, which she does. She ends up going with the old woman and of course realizes it's not a fun
grandma?
place. Yeah, with the grandma. But the baths were awesome. Like, I would have loved to visit that place because the baths looked fucking sick. If that is a real place, I'd like to go there, honestly.
Also, can we call the police because they depicted an underage girl in the nude? In this
I know,
movie?
right? I've spent years watching anime, being part of anime culture, but now I've suddenly, for the first time, been exposed to this idea that naked underage characters can happen, and I've decided that I need to mount a very serious moral crusade against it.
I was very upset and also very amused at the same time.
Takahata,
Yes.
a rule in Ghibli movies is if it's a Miyazaki film, you're going to see their underwear all the time. And if it's a Takahata film, you're going to see them naked once.
Okay, sick. All right.
That'll be
And
part
that
of the
applies to
Ghibli
literally
marathon
all of
drinking
them.
game.
I dare you to prove me wrong. Maybe not Howl's Moving Castle, but that's because she's an old lady in that one. So no one wants to see that.
I have a thing here. I'm not my notes aren't like theme driven. I don't see themes. I'm theme blind. I'm stupid when it comes to themes. I don't get it.
Right.
So I just wrote down things I liked, and I really liked when the three girls went up to Taikyo and said, "Lol, some boy likes you, haha."
Oh yeah, they all like march in step. They all
the
goose
whole
step up to
animation
her.
bit where they were, doing the funny march, and then they were so pleased that they had told her that someone likes her. Like I've seen that behavior, but I don't really understand the psychology going on there because I wasn't ever a girl. And I don't know.
I don't get it either. I don't even get what drives that. But like all the depictions of like elementary schoolers felt insanely true to life to me, especially the whole gym class scene. Like I was just like, wow, this is like being in gym class, except that none of the girls are allowed to fucking play the sport apparently. But yeah, that was a trip.
You mean when they're watching the baseball game?
Yeah, I assumed that was just like part of class since everyone was there. But like,
and there was that one bit where they went to the other class, and then like the boy was there, and then they did the cha-cha, they did the funny dance.
Somehow I've gone my entire life, watching anime constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've gone this long, and only very recently did I learn that like in Japanese schools, the teachers change classroom with the change of subject, and the kids stay in the same room.
It's one of those things
I
the
never
anime
realized
fails
that
to
before.
show us because it's so normal for them they don't even think it needs to be explained.
And also because they tend to put, like, anime tends to put a lot of emphasis on the homeroom teacher because they usually just show us the start and end of class, and so we see a lot of the homeroom teacher even though there's like a ton of others. But if you had watched Azumanga Daioh, you would have known this.
But I did watch Azumanga Daioh.
You never thought about the fact that
yet,
their teachers were switching out?
I guess I just figured that they were moving.
Yeah, I guess.
something.
Yeah, I mean, all the classrooms
know.
look exactly the same, so it's easy enough to make that mistake.
Yeah, I never. Only recently did I come to realize that, and then in this movie, she talks about the kid from like room 5 or whatever.
That's why
and
their
it's
school
like,
buildings are
right.
so comparably small. Why it's always just like one building with 3 floors, like one for each grade, and then there's just like 3 or 4 classes on that floor. You know.
I'm curious about American schools then, because in England, in secondary school we had a homeroom, but then for classes we would go to various areas of the
that's how it
school
is
which
for
were like
us.
specialized.
Yeah,
Although
okay.
it depends on the school, because there were some schools I went to that had a homeroom, and then the high school I went to, for the most part, just quote unquote homeroom was just whatever your first class was that day, but we didn't actually have a homeroom or homeroom teacher. Like,
We had a homeroom, and I never understood what the point of it was.
it's just that your homeroom teacher is meant to be who you go to if you need to defer to a teacher for something, basically. But like, because it was so badly structured at my school, nobody even fucking knew who their homeroom teacher was for the most part.
Amazing. Hey, what'd y'all think of the interesting and unique edits and visual moments of the movie? I showed 2 screenshots, one of which is her at the bath, and there's like little swivel frames of her in 3 different baths, which looked really cool. I'm sure that it was a really ambitious effect. But also at the very beginning of the movie, the mother is looking at her like report card or some shit, and
She zeroes in on just the bad grade.
it's an effect I've never
That's how
seen in
all
anything
mothers
before.
look at report cards.
But like,
there.
I've never seen this effect anywhere, where it's like, normally if you want to highlight something, you highlight it in a circle shape. But I guess they figured you wouldn't be able to catch that shape in time. So they highlight it while also creating a reticule pointing right at it. That's
Well, I think
really
it's
unique.
it's because it's on grid paper. So
Yeah,
that's
so it's
just, like, the
really
coolest
easy to
way
do.
it.
And then there's just, the time where she's singing that one encouragement song and a rainbow appears above her head. And it's so weird because it's
Her eyes turn all sparkly anime every now and
That's
then.
my
pre-
favorite.
pretty
Is the
fun.
sparkly eye.
Yeah.
it's not presented like normally when you get a movie that has there's lots of grounded moments, but then there's bursts of crazy shit. It always feels like a burst of crazy shit. But the way this movie does it, it feels just sort of like it happens, and it's not really even trying to be that tone breaking.
This movie, it feels like they don't really do it very hard, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just done very
sometimes her eyes
casually.
will go all sparkly and like anime-ish, and it's like, oh, she's feeling like some magical feeling, but it's just a little bit, and like you could almost miss it. If,
Right.
like,
I mean,
you
I
weren't
kind
paying
of took it
attention.
as that because these scenes are all memories. Like they're transient in their reality. Like, this is how she remembers it, how she would look back on it, but it's not
Yeah.
actually how it
Yeah.
happened. Whereas
They've got the whole thing with like the white in the background, like
Yeah.
taking over a lot of the shots.
I guess they don't really have the those effects in the present, do they?
no,
Well, yeah, one, it makes sense because these are memories, so they can be imbued with a little bit of magical realism because it's not necessarily literal. And 2, I mean, this is based on a manga, so probably a lot of these effects were like depicted visually in the manga and like are being recreated here.
So
through the new
my
medium.
probably my favorite moment in the whole show movie is when she has the flip out, holy shit, this boy's cool, and I'm still remembering him 17 years later moment. When she flies around the space, that's like whatever. When she's flying around in like Purple Land, whatever.
Yeah.
When her eyes
Yeah.
go all like sparkly, like whatever, that's cool. I just love how it begins this scene by having her walk out of sync with the background, and I specifically love it for how easy and obvious of a technique it is. All they do is just stop animating her. They just turn her animation into a loop, and she doesn't like go any further away from the camera. And instead of having her be in place, they just start moving her cells up the background, and it's such like a meta-breaking moment, the way that it's done.
It looks so bad to me. It reminds me
You're
of.
talking about when she's
I mean,
running up the stairs, basically?
running
sky,
up into
yeah.
the air.
Yeah.
It's so
yeah.
good because it's like
It looks so bad, and it reminds me of this
Did
this
it?
really old movie making program, which basically works as like if you got like stock animations and you can move them around, and while you're clicking and holding them, and you drag them, that's like recording footage. So like if I wanted a character to jump up, I would get like an animation for them like running away, and then like I would drag it up the screen, and it would look exactly like it does in this film.
It's so great because it's like exposing the technique of all animation with the foreground,
and
background
it was just so
framework.
jank, it was really fun.
Yeah, it's great because
I mean, I definitely think that what
playing the
Devue's
meta
saying
really well.
is, it's the intention is to make it like, oh yeah, by the way,
This is a silly dream, happy.
It's a great way to lead
story.
into the trippiness of, and just to make the emotions like explode after what is pretty much a really dull, awkward scene, and then suddenly it just goes like way rocketing.
It's
into
the equivalent of, I mean, you can think of an equivalent of this in every medium, and the reason why I'm excited about it is I haven't seen this variation. For example, if a character wants to, in a live-action movie, break through the meta, the first thing that'll happen is that they'll notice a boom mic maybe and knock it back, right? Or like a book will acknowledge the fact that it is being read by you, right? And I've just never heard of, and after reading Homestuck, you see a shitload of ways to break the formula, to have the medium acknowledge itself. And I just never saw this technique of lightly breaking the meta by having something misalign from the from the background. I don't know, like I've seen so many, even animation meta moments.
I don't
stuff
think
like
that's
Duck
what
Amuck.
it is.
It's not,
I don't think this is a meta.
It's not
moment.
meant to. It's
I
not
think
meant
this is
to
a bad.
be meta.
I think this
for
is a
the-
badly done effect.
It's not meant to explore meta. It's just there to give you a jolt, right? It's
I
there
wouldn't
to
describe
like.
it as badly done at all. It's like my favorite. That's like the only scene I remember.
Yeah, I
for
actually
the
don't
movie
think it looks that bad.
I love that whole sequence of like the baseball boy and the cute like romance that they have, and the fact that he has so much of a difficult time saying anything, and he just goes.
And he
she
gives her a
stops. He's
sad
like,
boy
please,
test.
Please continue.
You could take it as a if you want to just use the word autism again, you could call it that. But like the fact that what he asks her is, he doesn't say like I like you or do you want to go out or anything like that. He says, what type of day do you like best, sunny, cloudy, or rainy? And she says cloudy, and he says me too. And it's like just this was something like he wanted. It's just like a way for them to connect, and
it's so cute because like he runs off like that. He's sated.
Yeah.
He's content. Like he doesn't need to do anything else. He's done it. He throws his ball. He catches it, and she's like, yeah.
And it's like neither
I
one
wanna
of them
jump
even
up like a ball.
necessarily knows what this means. Like I don't think he necessarily knew what he meant by asking that, or that she knew what her response meant. But both of them clearly are satisfied that they've like made a connection here somehow.
Yeah.
I'm sad that obviously didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I thought it was weird that they didn't even address like that. She didn't even in the future just say like, oh, and then like here's
I think
what
that was,
eventually.
I think that was intentional because in a narrative context, when you set up something like a relationship, even if it's between 8-year-olds, you're expecting that Chekhov's gun to go off in some way or another. But in real life, you just get flirty with an 8-year-old, and you're an 8-year-old, and you're just 8-year-olds. Nothing actually ever has to happen out of that.
Yeah,
even if you're 28-year-olds.
I just thought it's strange because of the fact that the film does then continue into other scenes, and it's just like, the first time I watched it, I probably would have had to like take a second to go, oh, I guess that isn't I guess we shouldn't consider that to have been the start of a relationship or anything. Like she could have at least just thrown in a line like nothing else ever came of this, by the way.
I think the point of it going completely over the top in a way that none of the rest of the movie was like, with the trippy stuff, was to show how like, and it's just a childish, silly thing. It wasn't gonna last. It's not a real thing. They're just being cute.
There's one other bit, and that's the part where she's thinking about being a star, and there's the montage of like her on magazines and stuff. So that one's kind of another. By the way,
not as much though.
I'm on the Studio Ghibli wiki. And I've looked.
Well, hold on, Ben. Before we leave the subject
okay.
of this whole puppy love thing, one of my favorite details is that when she's watching the baseball game, she's so excited by just like the thought of what's going on, that like this guy who likes her is like performing well in this game, that she keeps having to go to the bathroom over and over and over again. And that is the most literally me thing in this whole movie, because I have to piss every like 15 minutes like clockwork, and it's related to the more excited I am, the more I piss. And so like I was just like, this is what I would have been doing at this time. And like I used to get in trouble in gym class because like I would literally ask to go to the bathroom like constantly, and they'd be like, we can't let you go like 3 times in the same class. I'm like, you don't understand, like it's the adrenaline, I gotta pee.
Well,
Oh yeah. There was this one note. I set it up earlier, so I may as well finish it, even though it's not. It's probably stupid. It's probably like completely unfounded. This idea that the scene where she goes all like jumping into the sky and being all lovey-dovey with the anime eyes, I thought was like Takahata poking fun at Miyazaki, and in my headcanon of like how it went down, it would be like the movie up until that point mostly was like realistic and like kind of awkward and sad and a bit depressing at moments, like especially when the mum like completely ignores her excitement at like getting a good grade and says, "You didn't eat your food, you fucking bitch," and slaps her and kills her. And it's like this movie's, and then Miyazaki looks over his shoulder, Takahata's shoulder, and he's like, it's a bit sad. You're not gonna make a blockbuster hit with this film, haha. And then you got to put some lovey-dovey moments in there, and he's like, Takahata's like, fuck you, fine.
From what I've heard, and this is minimal research, but like in this early period of Ghibli, the Takahata movies were way more successful than the Miyazaki ones. Because Takahata was like at this point like a 20 years long like household name in Japan. Like his first film is considered to be like the most important anime film of all time, basically. So like,
what's his first film?
Horus, Prince of the Sun. Or it's in like that. It's considered one of the most important. And like this movie, Only Yesterday, was like a huge smash hit. At the time.
So I don't know why it never came to America then.
I think it's just because it's so Japanese. They just thought people wouldn't fucking get it.
And maybe they were right.
Another very literally
maybe they hadn't given it a shitty dub.
Another very literally me line in this movie was when she's talking about how like her school, like she's talking about like having worked in the fields or whatever. She's like, oh, if I actually had gotten to go out and live this farm life, my school essays would have been so interesting. Like that thought of like all of your experiences only exist to later be written about in essays is exactly how my brain works.
Apparently in English, Horus, Prince of the Sun is called the Little Norse Prince.
Yeah, it's like based in some kind of Norse mythology or whatever, so that's probably.
But why does he have an Egyptian name? What the fuck?
I don't know, dude. Maybe they fucked it up. Maybe it's an Egyptian myth. I don't even know. It's a pretty alright movie. I mean, it's pretty standard like action adventure hero's journey type of movie. It's
anyway,
the puberty talk in this movie. I managed to miss that class 3 different times and never learn about puberty until high school.
And I still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kept moving like right before it would happen. And so I never got the talk. And that's why I still thought girls had cooties until I was like 18.
True.
What did you think? Wait. No. What?
I didn't literally mean
No,
that,
this can't be true.
Okay.
By the way, Digi, referencing what you said about moving constantly and how it kind of stunted your development in every way. When I said earlier that I have this framework of the more cliche of a millennial someone is, the more they were fucked in their upbringing, I especially think of you and me as excellent data points on this framework, because I think like I was brought up in a way that made me a little bit more dysfunctional but a little bit less depressed, and you the opposite. And then it like clearly affects like how much you can function, and then also how much you have to struggle with motivation, and then I'm the inverse.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, the inverse, but it's like inverse as in like 51% versus 49%, more so.
Yeah,
than like
about
0
that.
to 1. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, well, the only other note I have here is his line about "There's always a tomorrow," and how she had interpreted it as a song about putting things off, whereas he interpreted it as a song about like
really funny,
But when I thought about it,
and like it's gonna be okay.
I thought about that and I wondered, are they not the same thing? Like, is it not that you put things off because you're comfortable, that you don't need to, like, you don't need to move fast because tomorrow always comes, so there's always going to be more opportunities to get things right? Like, I just wondered if they weren't actually interpreting it the same way, just one is, an optimistic versus pessimistic look
one
at the
took
same.
it as a good thing and the other as a bad thing, Yeah. And then the girl is like, haha, these guys are old. I never heard of this shit before.
Yeah. What other notes do you guys have? I'm out.
I have one note.
I had like 4 notes, and I got them all out of the way in the first like 10 minutes.
The end credits. I almost didn't watch the end credits, and thus didn't realize that she ended up going back.
Yeah,
which
Thanos
is kind of a
shows up
crucial
and
thing, because like if she just goes home, it is a depressing story, kind of. And then
I remember
and then
being
she does
really
go home.
conflicted about, okay, because like my first viewing of this movie in the Coolidge Corner Theater, I kind of missed the beginning, and so I didn't get that she had this whole like long fixation on the countryside as much, and then at the end I thought it was weird that she would go back. Like I didn't get why she would want to go back, because like she's a city girl and she seems happy with that. But yeah, no, I was very conflicted about her going back.
I mean, her going
and,
back
like,
is kind of like an irrational, weird autist thing again, like doing something way too extreme, because like obviously she will have to then go to Tokyo and like get all her shit at some point. Like she could have just like waited.
Yeah.
She could have given them a phone call and been like, "Hey, by the way, I am going to move out here." But like
it's similar to how Jane decided to stay with Tarzan. It's actually kind of similar. Like you're going to be throwing away your whole life and commit to this completely off the grid shittery.
It seemed like a weirdly what's like over the top romantic gesture for such like a grounded movie.
That's why it was my favorite scene.
Nothing in this movie is like over the top. Like this movie doesn't feel like a romance at all. It's like there's like no sexual or romantic tension there. And maybe, I mean, I guess on Toshio's end there is, but like none of it is acknowledged by the girl at all, and you kind of have to look for it to even see it.
I mean, I see it as the way that the last scene plays out is meant to be a combo breaker. The whole movie is her waiting till tomorrow and the next day and the next day, waiting for a time where she feels like she can finally arrange things properly. And the pressure of her being 27 is part of the pressure, part of the narrative, because in Japan there's a whole thing about once you're 25 and a woman, you're no longer...
If you're a woman over 30, you're not marriageable anymore.
I've heard 25.
No, it's 20. It's 25 because that's why I said she's a Christmas cake before. Because it's after a Christmas cake is useless after the 25th, just like a woman.
So, anyway, so
I thought the meme was that I thought the reason they were called Christmas cakes is that those women will wait till the day after Christmas, and because they're alone, they go buy the Christmas cake on discount.
No, it's because they're useless
that literally
after the
happens
25th.
in Lucky Star. Is that like the Christmas cake teacher goes and buys a Christmas cake on sale on the 26th?
I think
maybe that was a pun.
That's just a pun.
It could be.
Well, that's not where I think. That's not where I heard that the name comes
right.
from.
Anyway, so yeah, the point of the last scene, and it's meant to be even more jarring by being in the credits, where plot isn't supposed to happen. Even the idea of having a post-credits teaser is only recent. That wasn't the case back in the early 90s. The idea is that she's finally done waiting to try and see if she can get together her life to be arranged correctly. There's just a moment where it's like, you're getting old enough, you just sort of have to go for it and be willing to put yourself to reduce your childhood entropy into adulthood, where you can no longer change your mind or make new decisions or learn new things. You just have to settle with something as scary and ambitious as it can be.
Well, I guess you might have the temptation to view this as her settling because she's getting old, but I think she's too autistic to really care enough to settle for something.
I like how Ben went from the start of this...
successfully convinced Ben, yes.
Ben went from, she's definitely not autistic, to she's so autistic.
Okay, in terms of like this relationship with Toshio, I don't know if I would diagnose her with autism, but in this way, she does act autistic. I mean, she doesn't fucking get this
I also
at all.
think that like that the face of her as a 10-year-old that it lingers on in the end is the face of autism. Like that completely dull, dry expression.
I don't know about...
I get that totally neutral expressionless.
I kind of thought that was funny.
Wait, the face of autism is a totally neutral face.
Just sort of, Yeah, she's just sort of looking over like.
Because autism is about autistic people are inexpressive in their face. They don't know how to emote, and that's why they love anime, because anime characters show obvious emotions in their face.
Except this one. This is why this one didn't do well.
Except it did extremely well, but
in Japan, it did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also the characters are extremely expressive in this movie, regardless of their being. Which maybe is why they chose to animate it and not do it live action, because they could, like, in spite of being realistic, the expressions are pretty fucking extreme. Like, when people smile, it's like this creepy face-eating fucking...
You know, these, like, 7-inch wrinkles on their cheeks, as we mentioned.
Yeah. That the whole idea of drawing the mouse like that when they're smiling just puts this movie from, like, a big number to a small number. That's what it does.
Damn, dude. I just wanted to say that you might see it as settling, but I don't think she would settle. I think that it's weird because it seems like Toshio himself is kind of an afterthought. Like, it seems like what she's really marrying is like the country life.
Yeah.
Toshio just kind of happens to be
that
there.
Just because she turns around doesn't automatically mean that she just married Toshio. Like,
oh, but come on, that's the implication.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, think about what I said, marry Toshio, and then she's going, and then she turns around. Like, that's what's implied happening.
She's going to set down that road. We don't necessarily know, like, it's not as though they're going to get married tomorrow. Like, there's a spark there. She now appreciates that. Now they can work towards it. Maybe they get
the difference is, like, imagine you're talking to someone online about some plan of yours, and, like, maybe they get back to you in a week, versus they show up at your door to have a meeting about this plan. The plan has just gotten 300% faster in its progress towards completion.
Well, I'm now eating, so let's wrap up this podcast.
I think I've said all I can possibly say about this.
I have one. I have one last little thing, is that when she was turning around and deciding to live in the farmland, and I imagined all the things that she would have to, like, sort out if she were responsible, and I thought I put myself in her shoes, because I had related to her a lot through the movie, and I thought, if I wanted to go into the if I had this opportunity to just live with a farm people, and I wanted to do that, and then I didn't have to, and then I would, like, all the bills that I have to pay would rack up, and then my bank account would slowly be drained until there was nothing left, and then there would be people hunting for my blood, and my university tuition fees would be like, the search warrants and helicopters with spotlights, and I'm like, man, if I go and do this, there's no way I can go back.
You're off the grid now.
This is like locking me into a different kind of hell.
Yeah. Well, with that note,
On that note, go watch my video, everyone. It's called Studio Ghibli's gay-ass, overly sentimental bullshit movie is pretty good.
Yes, if you want to hear
And
Ben's
Ben
outdated
Saint
opinions
channel.
from 2 years ago that he's gone back on in this podcast.
There's still perfect opinions.
All right, everybody. See you next time.
Relevant forever.
See you next time on GhibliCast. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
We'll see you next yesterday.